It's common knowledge that Voltron Legendary Defender is a reboot of an older cartoon from the 1980s. But when seeing discussion of potential references to the history of the franchise, not many people in the circles I frequented back when Legendary Defender was airing seemed to be aware of just how much history there was. Legendary Defender is the fourth TV series in the Voltron franchise, which in addition to the animated shows also includes 9 different comic series, 3 of which are direct tie-ins with the shows, while the rest are completely original stories with their own continuities. After several videos focused on literary analysis of Voltron Legendary Defender on its own, I want to do something different today, and look back on the history of the Voltron brand and how the franchise got to the position it's in today. Because in the process, I hope that doing so will shed some light on how much the modern series has been influenced by what has come before, both in terms of the actual plot and characters of the show itself, and also the behind-the-scenes conflicts between the creative team and the IP owner. Hello everyone, I'm the Violet Howler, and welcome to a new episode of Constructing Legends.
Born Voltron!
To talk about the history of Voltron, we first have to look back at the origins of the production company behind it. In 1959, real estate developer Harold Koplar created a TV network in St. Louis, Missouri called KPLR-11, initially operating out of the Park Plaza and Chase hotels that his family owned, and eventually moving to a separate, adjacent facility several years later. Over the years, the cost of programming went up, and in 1980, Harold's son Ted Koplar created World Events Productions so that they could pump out original content in an effort to lower the portion of the network's income that had to go toward operating expenses. To give the channel new kids shows after their broadcast of local after-school program Captain Eleven's Showboat ended in the late 60s, Ted Koplar took an approach that was uncommon for the time, and bought the rights to shows from other countries to adapt for American audiences. For those who aren't familiar with laws surrounding media like television, buying the rights to a property like a show essentially means paying for a license to use, modify, and distribute existing material. In 1983, Ted went to a convention in France accompanied by Peter Keefe, World Events co-founder and vice president, who got his start on the channel as a movie critic and as an announcer for kickboxing matches hosted in the ballroom of the Chase Hotel. At the convention, the two men saw some shows being presented from Toei Animation, the Japanese studio that would later go on to produce popular anime such as Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, Digimon, and One Piece. Following that presentation, Ted acquired the rights to 3 different Toei mecha series. First was Armored Fleet Die Rugger 15, about a group of explorers who combine their vehicles into a giant robot to battle a hostile alien empire while on a mission to map the galaxy. Second was Lightspeed Electroid Albigos, centered around a group of high school robotics students building a trio of robots that could combine into one giant robot to protect Earth against an alien invasion. And last was Future Robot Daltanius, a series about a group of orphans on a ravaged, conquered Earth using a trio of combining robots to fight back against the alien empire occupying the planet. However, when a World Events employee called to arrange for the shipping of the tapes, they couldn't remember the title of Daltanius and simply described it as the one with the lion. Which, thanks to the language barrier, resulted in Toei instead sending the tapes for a completely different anime called Beast King Go Lion, which followed a group of human astronauts who escape from the villainous Galra Empire after Earth is destroyed by World War III, and discover 5 mechanical lions on the planet Altea that combine into the robotic warrior Go Lion, the only weapon powerful enough to defeat the Galra.
I've seen that somewhere before.
While Go Lion had a lot more graphic violence than the other 2 series, Keefe and Koplar thought it had the spark of something that could immerse audiences in its world and story. From there, I've never been able to find out what happened with the rights to Daltanius, but once Ted secured the rights to Go Lion, Keefe became the showrunner tasked with adapting it, Die Rugger, and Albigos for American audiences as World Events' first production. Many people erroneously assume that from there, all the writers of World Events did was Americanize the character names and censor the worst of the violence. And I'm not saying that they didn't do either of those things, but the reality is that the making of the original Voltron was closer to how the first Power Rangers series was adapted from the Super Sentai show about a decade later, where the American company combined footage from multiple different sources to create their own story. While the story arcs adapted from each of the component anime had little direct overlap, Peter Keefe and World Events were able to cut and paste footage around and modify dialogue in order to develop a shared overarching mythology that tied all the different stories together. Unrelated characters from different anime were changed into family members, like Hiroshi Suzuishi from Go Lion and Yasuo Mutsu from Dairugger, becoming the brothers Pidge and Chip. The separate alien villains in each anime were written to now be different regions of the same civilization known as the Drool Empire, while the heroes of each series were connected via their mutual service to the Earth-based Galaxy Alliance and its military division, Galaxy Garrison. Meanwhile, the giant combining robots of each anime were all referred to by the same name in order to tie the three different shows together, with a line of dialogue in the Dairugger storyline implying that the Go Lion robot was the original and the other two were made in its image. World Events was not the first production company to do this kind of mixing of footage from different sources to create a new story, but this was the earliest example I could find of it being done in the US for animation specifically. Initially, Ted Koplar suggested giving the robots of the series World Events was adapting the name Klystron after a piece of broadcasting equipment as an inside joke for fellow TV executives. Meanwhile, someone else in the production team came up with the name Voltar as an alternate idea. Then at one point, according to behind-the-scenes lore, Ted accidentally mixed the two names together during an inquiry about the status of production, inadvertently coining the name Voltron, which ultimately stuck. The show itself made no effort to distinguish one robot from the other, and early merchandise simply labeled the three combining robots as Voltron 1, Voltron 2, and Voltron 3. So for the sake of greater clarity, most fans refer to them as Vehicle Voltron, Gladiator Voltron, and Lion Voltron, respectively. And now that we've talked about the production behind the original series, let's finally get into the show itself.
From days of long ago, from uncharted regions of the universe, comes a legend.
The series kicked off in 1984 under the title Voltron Defender of the Universe, and aired 52 episodes of the Lion Voltron storyline between September 10th and November 27th. The first episode of Season 1 opens with a team of astronauts arriving in orbit over the planet Eris on an expedition to search for the legendary robot Voltron. Our heroes consist of Keith, formerly Akira Kogane in Go Lion, the quiet, introspective team leader, Lance, a wisecracking pilot who occasionally butts heads with Keith, based on Go Lion's Isamu Kurogane, Pidge, based on the character of Hiroshi Suzuishi, who is the youngest of the group and the team's resident tech specialist, Hunk, the largest and strongest of the team, with a love for food and a soft spot for kids and animals, based on the Go Lion character of Tsuyoshi Sado, and Sven, the team's soft-spoken and reserved second-in-command, who is actually based on two completely different Go Lion characters, Takashi Shirogane and his identical twin brother Ryo, whose footage was combined into Sven in order to censor out their individual death scenes by making them one character. When the team reaches Eris, they find the planet being raided by the armies of King Zarkon from Planet Doom, a tyrant who spreads his influence across the universe around him and tries to steal as many resources as he can, uncaring of the destroyed civilizations left in his wake. The heroes try to help Eris, only to end up captured by Zarkon's forces and taken back to Planet Doom as slaves to fight in the Gladiator Pit. But before the main cast can be sent into the arena, Pidge manages to come up with a plan to have Hunk bend the bars on the window in order to escape from their cell, allowing them to break out and escape the planet in a stolen ship. As they flee, they are pursued by Zarkon's lieutenant, Commander Yurak, based on Go Lion's Commander Sadak, whose design will undoubtedly look familiar to fans of Legendary Defender. The team manages to make it back to Eris, and their ship is promptly pulled down into the atmosphere by a tractor beam emanating from a lion statue in front of an ancient, ruined castle. When the team identifies it as the legendary Castle of Lions where Voltron was supposedly hidden, Keith tells the legend of the mighty robot and how it was broken up into 5 pieces and lost because of a curse cast by Hagar, the wicked witch who serves as Zarkon's right hand. At the start of the next episode, the ship crashes into the mountains near the castle, and the heroes quickly make their way inside while avoiding the patrols of Yurak's forces. Once they enter the castle, the team is greeted by an old man carrying a torch who introduces himself as Karan, the castle's diplomat, based on the Golian character of Rybal. When Karan hears that they're looking for Voltron, he introduces the space explorers to Princess Allura, the only survivor of Aeris' royal court, who was adapted from Golian's Princess Fala of the planet Altea. Together, Karan and Allura tell the heroes and the audience how Zarkon's forces invaded and ravaged planet Aeris several years ago, in the process killing Allura's father, King Alfor. We learn that at the start of Zarkon's original invasion, Voltron was sent to respond, only for Hagar to lure the robot into a trap before using her magic to shatter it into 5 pieces that took the shape of mechanical lions and crashed back down to Aeris. Though the physical locations of the lions are all known, the knowledge of how to combine them into Voltron died with King Alfor, leaving Aeris defenseless against Zarkon's forces, allowing him to enslave most of the populace unopposed while the rest went into hiding. After hearing their story, the 5 humans pledge to help restore Voltron and protect Aeris so that Karan and Allura can restore their planet to its former glory. At the start of Episode 3, Karan reveals that the keys to the lions were hidden inside the royal tomb underneath the castle. As Urak's forces continue to sweep the planet in search of the 5 escapees, Karan takes them down to the tomb. When they get down there, the ghost of King Alfor appears and reveals that the keys are hidden inside his own coffin, but the heroes soon find that the key to the Black Lion, which forms Voltron's head and torso, is missing from its case. With Urak's forces still threatening Aeris, Pidge volunteers to scout the enemy's movements, only for him to be spotted by their ground troops and pinned down by enemy gunfire. The rest of the team comes to Pidge's rescue with the lions they do have keys for, with Hunk in yellow, Lance in red, Sven in blue, and Keith in green? But before they can reach Pidge, he ends up trapped on the side of a mountain, and the Drool forces try to bury him with an avalanche, only for him to be rescued by a band of Erusian civilians who save him from the falling rocks by pulling him into their cave. Meanwhile, the 4 lions manage to defeat Urak's ground forces, but the tables quickly turn on them when a giant flying coffin descends from the sky and unleashes a giant biomechanical monster created by Hagar that quickly defeats the lions and knocks all the pilots unconscious. At the start of the 4th episode, Pidge makes his way back to the Castle of Lions through a series of underground tunnels that his rescuers lead him to, and the rest of the team eventually wake up and escape from the monster. When they all reconvene at the castle, the team sets out to search for the missing key to the Black Lion, but searching the castle fails to turn up any leads. After another look at Alfor's coffin, the team notices a mouse hole in the rock wall of the tomb, and Pidge tells the team about the quartet of space mice that he spotted around the castle over the last couple of episodes. With no better options, and concerned that one of the mice might have swallowed the key, the heroes track the mice down and lure them into a trap so that they can be interrogated. But then Allura comes in and begs the Earthlings to let the mice go, revealing that they are her friends since they were her only company while her parents were away on various royal visits during her childhood. After being told that the humans think the mice took the Black Lion's key, Allura kindly asks them to give it back, and they immediately retrieve it from an old boot they stashed in their nest. With all 5 keys now in hand, the heroes head back out to fight the next wave of Urak's forces, and Keith moves into the Black Lion while Pidge takes over Green. Although the lions can be piloted by anyone, and there will be multiple times when characters will change up who flies what lion for a scene, this pilot roster of Keith in black, Lance in red, Hunk in yellow, Pidge in green, and Sven in blue quickly becomes the default arrangement. When the giant monster attacks again, the heroes manage to figure out how to combine into Voltron for the first time, and quickly manage to destroy the monster with Voltron's sword, ending the invasion of Aeris and declaring the return of Voltron to the universe. From there, the show followed a Monster of the Week format, as each episode had the heroes use Voltron against the forces of Planet Doom to protect Planet Aeris, and also free other nearby worlds from Zarkon's oppression, such as the planets Nemon, Maura, and Yadel. Zarkon's forces were typically embodied by either Urak's conventional war fleet, or giant monsters called Robeasts, which were biomechanical monstrosities created from a combination of science and magic, the designs of which were on a spectrum ranging from fully organic monsters with basic strength like Pterodactyl, to regular giant robots with onboard weapons like the Omega Beast. But most were somewhere in the middle with varying combinations of organic bodies and implanted weapons like Diclops. On occasion, Hagar would try to personally capture or eliminate Allura by disguising herself to get close, sending illusions to lure the princess into traps, mind-controlling spies, poisoned or cursed flowers, and other mystical methods of getting past the hero's defenses. Meanwhile, the Space Mice occasionally got their own subplots where they would help save the day when the pilots were incapacitated, end up having a rivalry with Hagar's pet cat Kova, and eventually got their own mouse-sized vehicle that could shift between mech and plane. Although the episodes did follow a general pattern, the show did have story arcs and secondary plot lines running throughout the season so that the status quo was constantly evolving. The first significant shift occurred in Episode 6, where Hagar infiltrated Planet Eris and kidnapped Lance, leading to a one-on-one fight with Sven after he rescued his teammate. In Go Lion, this was where his original counterpart Takashi Shirogane was killed off, but in Voltron, the Blue Lion pilot was instead left critically injured, forcing the team to send him to a better medical facility off-world in order to recover. In the next episode, his absence leads Allura to step up and take his place as pilot of the Blue Lion, having grown tired of sitting sheltered and protected inside her castle as she lost the people she loved, and wanting to fight for her planet herself. And while Allura takes over Sven's role as a pilot, his position as Keith's second-in-command passes over to Lance. The next major shift occurred in Episode 14, where Yurak was demoted for his repeated failures to conquer Eris, and transformed into a Robeast for one final mission against Voltron to redeem himself. In his place as commander of the invasion force, audiences were introduced to Zarkon's own son, Prince Lotor, based on the Go Lion character of Prince Syncline. When Lotor attacks Eris in the same episode, he becomes infatuated with Allura's beauty, and in the next episode decides he wants her as his bride. Over the rest of the season, he makes multiple attempts to get the princess to marry him, which gradually begins to drive a wedge between himself and his father, and causes their previously warm relationship to sour. Another major subplot begins in Episode 17 with the introduction of Pollux, a planet inhabited by Erusian exiles, whose royal family, consisting of King Koba, his sons Avok and Bandor, and his daughter Rommel, are Allura's distant cousins. The Polluxian royals are initially introduced as warmongers and conquerors in their own right, who are willingly collaborating with Zarkon to capture Eris, with Prince Avok volunteering to be turned into a Robeast while his siblings cheer for his anticipated victory over Voltron. And King Koba is plotting with his advisors to usurp Zarkon and take over the universe himself. Seeing the results of Avok's transformation causes Rommel to start having second thoughts, making her more receptive toward peace when the Voltron pilots travel to Pollux in secret to negotiate with Eris' sister planet. Then after Avok's defeat, Lotor takes Rommel prisoner and drags her back to Planet Doom as a hostage in response to Koba's treachery and Pollux's allegiance switching to Voltron. During her time as a prisoner, Rommel denies her family's past actions and agency to cope with her grief, while Lotor tries to convince her to marry him as a substitute for his pursuit of Allura. But when she refuses, he eventually grows tired of her, and at the end of Episode 40 tosses her into Planet Doom's Pit of Skulls, where prisoners are thrown to be executed. Yet Rommel manages to survive, and at the bottom of the pit, she discovers another prisoner condemned to the same fate. At which point audiences are reintroduced to our old friend Sven at the start of Episode 41, who was captured by the Drools off-screen when Zarkon's forces invaded the planet his hospital was on. Sven and Rommel proceed to team up and spend the rest of the season building a resistance force of fellow prisoners to wage guerrilla warfare against Zarkon and Lotor from inside their own seat of power. And in the process of working together, Rommel and Sven begin to develop romantic feelings for each other. Then in Episodes 48 and 49, the heroes meet a man named Garrett, who claims to be Karan's long-lost son, who went missing after Zarkon first attacked the planet all those years ago. However, Garrett soon turns out to be a spy sent by Lotor to infiltrate the Castle of Lions and sabotage its defenses. His betrayal allows Lotor to move in a giant space cannon capable of hitting targets from light years away, planning to use Eris as a base from which to target the Galaxy Alliance. When the heroes defeat Lotor and Garrett, and subsequently seize control of the cannon for themselves, Zarkon grows fed up with Lotor's failures and has his son arrested at the start of Episode 50, while he personally leads an attack on Eris to try and take the cannon back. But after Voltron manages to repel his attack, Zarkon's own failures inspire the leadership of the Drool Empire to free Lotor and have him usurp his father's throne to bring Zarkon's territory back under the influence of the main empire. Meanwhile, over the course of episodes 47 through 50, the Voltron pilots begin meeting with the leaders of all the planets they've liberated over the course of the season, and trying to rally them to form an alliance to take the fight to Zarkon, which culminates in a coordinated invasion of Planet Doom in episodes 51 and 52. After using the giant space cannon to punch through Doom's defenses at the end of episode 50, Voltron battles a giant Robeast version of Zarkon in episode 51. Meanwhile, Rommel and Sven's resistance group makes their way across the surface to attack Haggar's personal lab just after she launches Zarkon's Robeast. When Lotor warns the witch about Rommel's incoming attack, Haggar brushes him off, and he responds by telling her that she's on her own. After the rebels take out Haggar's laboratory and Voltron defeats Robeast Zarkon, they press on to target Castle Doom itself, only for Lotor to unveil a new cannon he had built that starts firing missiles to take down Voltron. With Voltron pinned down by the missiles as Lotor's fleet closes in, Rommel and Sven's forces, along with the Space Mice, manage to take down the cannon, while Haggar destroys the missiles as payback for Lotor abandoning her earlier, challenging him to fight Voltron himself. After Voltron defeats Lotor's fleet, he proceeds to activate his last line of defense, causing Castle Doom to rise from the ground and sprout mechanized combat tentacles with laser cannons on the tips to keep Voltron at bay. With the tentacles keeping Voltron from reaching Castle Doom, Karan unveils the Castle of Lions' ability to transform into a spaceship and flies the fortress toward Planet Doom, where its artillery lays down cover fire so that Voltron can destroy the enemy castle's defenses. Once Castle Doom's weapons are destroyed, the nobility and soldiers of Planet Doom surrender, while Lotor himself refuses to go down without a fight and tries to kill his own subordinates when they attempt to mutiny against him. While the soldiers outside stand down, Sven heads inside to confront Lotor alone, only for Lotor to bait him into a trap and take him hostage. With Sven now held at sword point, Lotor forces our heroes to park Voltron outside the castle and exit the robot, which he promptly tries to melt down with a giant laser. But before Voltron can be destroyed, the Space Mice swoop in on their tiny mouse plane and shoot Lotor in the back of the head, stunning him long enough for Sven to escape and destroy the laser, saving Voltron. Sven and Lotor then grapple until they both fall off the roof of Castle Doom as the Drool Fortress crumbles to the ground. But unlike their Go-Lion counterparts who died from the fall, a voiceover and some recycled footage establish that both Lotor and Sven survived. With Planet Doom's military infrastructure destroyed, the heroes return to Eris, and Karan gives a speech in front of Voltron while the pilots take a relaxing nap in a meadow. Then the season finale cuts to the Vehicle Voltron cast having some downtime aboard their own fleet, where Pidge's brother Chip receives a letter informing him about Lion Voltron's victory. And that was the end of Season 1.
From days of long ago, from uncharted regions of the universe, comes a legend.
When the Lion Voltron season ended, world events moved on to the 52-episode Vehicle Voltron season between December 1984 and March 1985, though a couple episodes actually aired during the broadcast of the Lion Voltron episodes. Following the reactivation of Lion Voltron, Eris has shared the technology behind the Lions with the Galaxy Alliance, allowing the Galaxy Garrison to create their own version of Voltron made from 15 combining military vehicles. Why 15? Because that number of people is the minimum number of players for an official rugby team. Yes, really, that's where the name of the anime Die Rugger comes from. The 15 pilots are divided up into 3 5-man teams for land, sea, and aircraft. But due to the large number of characters, the 15 pilots ended up not getting equal levels of development, with some team members being little more than glorified background characters. The air team consisted of Jeff, the impulsive and hot-headed squad leader and the leader of Vehicle Voltron as a whole, Rocky, who's basically the hunk of the group, Chip, the brother of Pidge, who fills the same niche in the Vehicle Voltron team as his brother does in Lion Voltron, Wolo, an introspective daydreamer and one of the handful of aliens on the team, and the strong-willed pilot Ginger. The C team consists of squad leader Crick, another alien team member who has mild clairvoyant powers that let him detect when something bad has happened, Lisa, the team's expert on ancient cultures and languages who often helps her teammates open up about their problems, the blunt and cynical Shannon, and then the two glorified background characters Tagore and Zandy. Lastly, the land team is made up of laid-back squad leader Cliff, Cinda, an athletic nature lover from the same species as Crick with similar clairvoyant powers, MODOK the gentle giant, and finally the comic relief duo of Marvin and Hutch. The Vehicle Voltron team is accompanied by their support fleet and its flagship, the SS Explorer, under the hard-working leadership of Commander Hawkins and his second-in-command, Captain Newley. Unlike the Lion Voltron storyline, we're thrown right into the action instead of having a long, multi-episode origin story of how they got the robot. When we begin the season, our new heroes have been sent on a mission to explore the universe and scout new planets for the Alliance to establish colonies on in the hopes of alleviating overcrowding in its home territory. Most of the episodes involve the Vehicle Voltron force investigating new planets and ending up in conflict with the Drool Empire's warfleet due to a combination of their expedition encroaching on Drool space, or the Empire's fleet attempting to claim the same planets for themselves. And occasionally the Vehicle Voltron team will end up battling Robeasts in the course of their adventures, all of which are firmly on the purely mechanical end of the design spectrum. Despite being in opposition to each other, the Vehicle Voltron team and Commander Hawkins repeatedly try to pursue peace and negotiate with the Drools first, with a couple episodes having them befriend individual Drool soldiers in order to show their willingness to coexist. Then in episode 17, we learn that the Drool home planet is dying from its government dumping toxic waste, and that the Warfleet's desire to conquer new worlds is motivated by the search for a suitable planet that can house and sustain the homeworld's population. The Drool fleet is led by several notable officers, but the most significant to the overarching plot is Hazar, the fleet's overall commander, based on the Die Rugger character of Sokrat Tellus, who is actually one of, if not the major driving force behind the season's overall story arc. To the point where we get more than one episode that's focused almost entirely on Hazar dealing with the internal politics of the Empire, while the adventures of the Vehicle Voltron team are the B-plot of the episode, if they even appear at all. Initially, Hazar is focused on war and conquest for its own sake, but during the first 6 episodes he has a change of heart, and from episode 7 onward starts advocating for peaceful coexistence between the Drools and the Alliance. But when Hazar begins trying to make peace with the Vehicle Voltron team, he finds that many of his underlings and superiors care more about fighting the Alliance and destroying them than they do about saving the people of their home planet. His commanders, such as the bitter Viceroy Throck and the tyrannical Emperor Zeppo, repeatedly order Hazar to attack the Vehicle Voltron force despite his desire to make peace, and we later learn toward the end of the season that they and most of the Empire's ruling council are actively keeping the people of the Drool homeworld in the dark about the planet's impending demise. Meanwhile, many of Hazar's own subordinates intentionally ignore his orders when he tries to prevent fighting, and some even try to mutiny against him in episode 16 when he signs a temporary treaty with the Alliance. After learning of the plight of the Drools, the Vehicle Voltron team sets their course toward the Drool homeworld in the hopes that they can convince the people to let the Alliance help them evacuate and relocate. But in episode 22, Hazar is demoted by the Empire's ruling council and summoned back to planet Drool, while command of his fleet is given to the wicked Marshal Kizor, who has no qualms about attempting to eliminate the Vehicle Voltron force. When Hazar arrives on planet Drool in episode 24, he briefly reunites with his sister Dorma and their father Mozak, the latter of whom happens to be his lone advocate on the ruling council. Then in the same episode, the Council court-martials Hazar for working with the Alliance, and reassigns him to a remote outpost on a distant planet as punishment. With Dorma accompanying him for support, Hazar spends his screen time in the next 20 episodes continuing to advocate for peace, but just like before, the people around him continue to interfere with his efforts. Eventually, Throck and Zeppo decide that Hazar is too dangerous to leave free, and summon him back to planet Drool in episode 44 to court-martial him again and throw him in prison off-screen. After confronting Throck over her brother's arrest at the start of episode 47, Dorma finds her way to an underground Drool resistance force plotting a revolution against the leadership of the Empire so that their people can evacuate the planet. In episode 50, the SS Explorer and its support fleet finally reach the Drool homeworld and request permission to land and help, but Throck responds by launching the planet's defense fleet to attack them. Vehicle Voltron manages to make quick work of the fleet and heads down to the surface, where the team is forced to fight Robeast after Robeast over the course of episodes 50 and 51 as they clear a path for the Explorer to land. While Vehicle Voltron battles Robeasts on the surface, Dorma and the Resistance take advantage of the chaos to break Hazar out of prison in episode 50 and launch an assault on the military headquarters in episode 51. When they breach the base, her and Hazar's father informs them that Throck and the War Council have escaped to Zeppo's palace, where they beseech the Emperor to retreat with them to a nearby planet where they can stage a counterattack. Despite the rebel forces closing in on his palace, Emperor Zeppo insists on meeting with Hazar face-to-face before he joins Throck in attempting to flee. When Hazar arrives, Zeppo agrees to surrender and never make war with the Alliance again in exchange for being allowed to escape unharmed. While Hazar doesn't think it's a good idea, he agrees to the request, and Vehicle Voltron is assigned to escort Zeppo out of Planet Drool's solar system to make sure he doesn't try to back out of his agreement. But despite Zeppo planning to come back later and retake his throne, he does retreat for the time being without further issue, and by the start of episode 52, the rebellion has put Hazar in charge of the Drool government. The rest of the season finale focuses on the evacuation of the Drool homeworld as the heroes rush to get everyone off the planet before it explodes, with reinforcements from the Galaxy Garrison arriving just in time to get the last of the evacuees. Once everyone is safely away, Dorma, Hazar, and the rest of their people look on as their home planet comes apart before the Alliance fleet helps them relocate to a new planet off-screen on which to resettle the Drool people. And that was where the second season ended.
In the far reaches of the universe, the beautiful planet Aris had been enjoying peace and prosperity, thanks to the courage of the Voltron Lion Force.
After Vehicle Voltron ended, World Events did a 45-episode Season 3 that adapted the story of Albagas. Or at least, that's what would have happened if the Lion Voltron story hadn't proven to be so much more popular than Vehicle Voltron that kids kept writing letters to World Events offices asking where the Lions were the entire time the Vehicle Voltron season was airing. So instead of going forward with adapting Albagas, World Events paid Toei to create several new episodes and a TV movie with brand new animation based on completely original scripts that continued the story of the Lion Voltron characters beyond the endpoint of Go Lion. In these new episodes, Zarkon has reclaimed his throne off-screen and begun another campaign to conquer Eris, demoting Lotor back to his original place as a general in his father's army. To prevent things from being a complete rehash of the first season, the new episodes introduced multiple new characters and storylines to build upon what happened in the episodes adapted from Go Lion. On the hero side of things, we get more direct interaction between the Lion pilots and the Galaxy Garrison back on Earth, as well as further development of a romance between Rommel and Sven. Meanwhile, on the villain side of things, we are introduced to two new major characters who play a recurring role in the schemes of Planet Doom, neither of whom have any basis in Go Lion. First, we get a new Drool commander named Cossack, who serves as Lotor's primary lieutenant and generally fills the niche of the bumbling comic relief sidekick.
Their goodness is their Achilles heel!
Achilles? Is he a spy?
Second, we are introduced to a new, independent villain, Queen Merla, the ruler of a neighboring Drool faction who uses telepathy to manipulate others into doing what she wants. Merla is introduced forming an alliance with Zarkon to destroy Voltron and conquer Eris, but secretly has ambitions to take over his territory for herself. To solidify the alliance, Zarkon sets up an arranged marriage between her and Lotor, but Lotor is still dead set on marrying Allura, and any attempts to move his engagement with Merla along and get them hitched consistently take as many steps backward as they do forward. On top of the new characters, with the writers now able to create new story beats from scratch instead of repurposing existing footage from Go Lion, we also begin to see a noticeable shift in the portrayal of Lotor's character. Where before he was firmly on the bad guy's side and always acting in opposition to the good guys, now his feelings for Allura start leading him to turn against his own allies on multiple occasions in order to protect her from harm. He even helps Team Voltron on a couple occasions, and Merla ends up doing the same in the penultimate episode to convince them to help her rescue Lotor from his father. And the season finale revolves around Lotor attempting to prove to both Merla and our heroes that he can be good by helping Team Voltron infiltrate his father's castle to try and force Zarkon to surrender. While Lotor does double-cross the Voltron team at the climax of the episode, his interaction with Merla when she confronts him during his escape implies that it wasn't done out of genuine malice, but because he was afraid of committing to permanently switching sides.
Lotor, what did you do?
I can't be good! It's impossible!
You took the easy way out.
Because that line sounds like the kind of thing you'd hear from a character mid-redemption arc after an act of self-sabotage, like Zuko in Avatar The Last Airbender, or Razor in Green Lantern the Animated Series.
Why am I so bad at being good?
With this shift in Lotor's characterization also came a change in the portrayal of his pursuit of Allura. In the beginning of the series, he was initially focused on possessing her and treating her as a prize, one of many dancing girls in his thinly censored royal harem. But over the course of the series, particularly in this new season, his fixation develops into wanting to make her his one and only queen of the universe, going from wanting a marriage where she serves his every whim to one where he is serving her. He even spends the opening minutes of one episode building a quiznacking temple in her honor. Not to mention that there's a few lines of dialogue which, when combined with the fact his obsession grows as she continually defeats and outwits him, suggest that he's attracted to her because of her capabilities as a warrior as much, if not more, than he's attracted to her looks. Meanwhile, although Allura and Keith are teased as a potential couple multiple times throughout the series, they're never officially referred to as such at any point in the original show. And although Allura initially rejects Lotor's efforts to get her to marry him, once he starts going through character development, she starts to show signs that his interest in her might not be so one-sided after all. When Merla makes a joke in one episode implying that Lotor's muscles aren't really as big as they look, Allura reacts as if the idea horrifies her, potentially implying that she finds him physically attractive.
He thinks he's so great just because he's got big muscles.
They're not really that big. I'll tell you a secret. Underneath his uniform, he wears foam rubber shoulder pads. You're fun.
And perhaps most significantly, when Lotor asked her to marry him in the last episode of the season during their team-up to infiltrate Zarkon's castle, the reasons she gives for declining have nothing to do with her not being interested.
Then tell me you'll be my bride!
Lotor, I'm a pilot on a mission. Anyway, you're pledged to Merla.
Which implies that if the circumstances were different, she might have actually considered saying yes.
Elizabeth, will you marry me?
I don't think now's the best time!
Not to mention that the original season featured a legend in Allura's culture about two lovers from warring kingdoms whose love built a bridge across the river that separated them, which later comics even gave Lotor a direct connection to. After the show's last episode came a TV movie titled Fleet of Doom that directly brought the Lion and Vehicle Voltron sides of the series together on screen for the first time. The overall plot of the film centered around a key garrison base being attacked by the combined forces of not only Zarkon and Lotor, but also Throk from the Vehicle Voltron season. Together, the three have assembled a war fleet so large that both Voltron teams must join forces to stop them and save the day. But the main meat of the story is focused around Allura, Keith, and Hagar. While the Castle of Lions is on the way to rendezvous with the Vehicle Voltron team, the witch sneaks aboard and snatches Allura's soul from her body, trapping the princess's consciousness in a fear dimension shaped by people's imaginations. With the help of King Althor's ghost, Keith goes alone to try and rescue Allura, and ends up battling the personification of his own fears in order to reach the princess. But by the time he conquers his fears and reaches Hagar's lair, Allura has already rescued herself. While held captive by Hagar, the princess tries to understand the witch's motives, and in the process, she learns that Hagar used to use her magic for good and was loved for it, until the witch was seduced by Zarkon and tampered with dark magic to please him, resulting in the loss of her beauty. Upon hearing Hagar's story, Allura appeals to the tiny bit of goodness left inside her, causing the personification of the witch's past good self to emerge and tear apart her lair in the dream world. Though Hagar insists that it's too late for her, she manages to send Keith and Allura back to the real world before she returns to Planet Doom, while Keith and Allura quickly rejoin the fight against Zarkon and Throk's forces, allowing the team to finally form Voltron. Then, with the help of the vehicle Voltron Force, they quickly manage to defeat the Drool War Fleet and various robeasts thrown at them, after which they settle down to celebrate with their allies, while Zarkon and Throck's forces retreat to lick their wounds and plan their next move. Despite the original Voltron's popularity, production never went any farther after Fleet of Doom, and the original cartoon ended here. Instead, World Events production moved on to other shows, releasing another anime adaptation from 1987 to 1988 called Saber Rider and the Star Sheriffs, based on Studio Pierrot's Star Musketeer Bismarck. Then in 1988, in the middle of producing their first completely original show, Denver the Last Dinosaur, Peter and Ted had a falling out that not only resulted in Keith quitting World Events to start his own production company, but also suing Koplar and World Events. The official explanation for their falling out in the 80s was a dispute over Peter Keefe believing that Koplar had verbally agreed to pay him more and wasn't following through, but what I find interesting is that newspaper records of the lawsuit's outcome indicate that in addition to breach of contract and fraud, his initial lawsuit also alleged copyright infringement, even if only the first one ultimately held up in court. And it's worth pointing out that in the cast and crew commentary on the 2007 special edition DVD collection of the original series, Peter Keefe described how Lotor was his favorite character because of his complexity and inner conflict.
But Lotor was conflicted, and that's why I liked him, and we made him that way as much as possible. A brilliant mind, a dashing soul, and yet with a bent toward the bad side, the dark side. So he was sort of that fellow you love to hate. I think he was my favorite because he probably was the most representative of conflicted souls in the real world.
Because after Keefe's departure, World Events made two different Voltron shows that were each presented as official sequels to the original series taking place in one singular continuity, yet each one ignores just about everything past the end of Voltron Season 1, which includes the majority of Lotor's character growth. Gone was any trace of the dashing soul that Peter Keefe spoke of, along with any inner conflict or sympathetic qualities that might humanize him. And each official sequel series redesigned Lotor from his handsome warrior prince aesthetic in the original to disfigured and monstrous with a voice to match.
Friendship! I will possess you, Allura! You will be my bride!
He's shouting, James will stop him!
Sweet princess, this would be a lot easier if you would just stay still. By my count, your plans have a 100% failure rate against Voltron. A lump of dirt would get the same results. Still, it is a magnificent castle you've built me.
Comparing Lotor's characterization in later shows with how he was written in the final season of the original series leads me to believe that either Keefe's intentions for Lotor's character played a role in his and Koplar's falling out, or that the change in Lotor's characterization in later shows was done out of spite towards Keefe. Whatever the reason, 10 years after Peter Keefe left, World Events went on to produce a CG animated series called Voltron: The Third Dimension, with Ted Koplar as one of the executive producers.
From days of long ago, from uncharted regions of the universe, comes a legend. The legend of Voltron.
The first episode of Third Dimension opens with Voltron battling a fleet of Doom warships in response to Zarkon and Lotor conducting raids on Galaxy Alliance territory with a new generation of ships and weapons. They manage to defeat Lotor's fleet and destroy his command ship, causing him to crash down to the surface of Planet Doom, where despite his severe injuries from the crash, Lotor uses his last act before being captured to cause Castle Doom to attach from the planet and take off into the unknown, taking all of its weapons with it. We then cut to 5 years later, where Voltron has been retired after Lotor's imprisonment, and peace has settled across the galaxy. However, they still haven't found what happened to Castle Doom and the cache of weapons inside it. So to avoid any chance of them falling into the wrong hands, Amalgamus, the artificial intelligence in charge of the Alliance created from the collective governments of all its member worlds, brings Keith and Allura to the prison planet of Bastille 12 to help him interrogate Lotor. When they arrive, the three are joined by King Zarkon, who has apparently reformed off-screen during the time skip after seeing Lotor's injuries from the opening battle, and now serves as the Alliance's Minister of Peace? Inside the prison, Lotor is revealed to have been turned into a cyborg to save his life after the injuries he sustained, leaving his body 86% cybernetic. Zarkon and Allura each try to convince Lotor to tell him where he sent Castle Doom, but he stubbornly refuses to cooperate, and when Allura tries to offer her friendship, he lashes out, loudly declaring that he will possess her as his bride, before Amalgamus has him restrained and tased unconscious. We then catch up with the rest of the Voltron force and see what they've been up to since the Lions were retired. Lance was working as a stunt pilot doing aerial obstacle courses to show off his skills, but gets fired when his daredevil stunts to alleviate his boredom cause him to crash one too many times. Meanwhile, Hunk and Pidge appear to be working in a garage, building and repairing ships from spare parts, while Pidge answers Voltron fan mail. Suddenly, a galactic news broadcast announces that an Alliance outpost is under attack by space pirates, the first incident of such activity in years. While Amalgamus and the Alliance debate the veracity of the report, Keith barges into the meeting of the Alliance leadership and requests permission to investigate in the Black Lion. Fearing that seeing one of the Lions active again will make the public panic, Amalgamus instead insists that Keith take an unmarked, unarmed ship to investigate solo. After Keith sets off, he discovers Lance stowed away on his ship and reluctantly lets him tag along. Yet when they find the pirates attacking an unprotected cargo ship, the lack of weapons prevents them from doing anything except for escaping by warping their ship to Eris, where they crash land from the damage they took during the flight. After reconvening at the Castle of Lions with Allura and Karan, they realize the pirates have been stealing the components used to make the ships and weapons that Lotor was building before his capture. Suspecting that Lotor was behind everything, Keith asks Hunk and Pidge to stop by the prison and check on him, where the pair discover that since Keith and Allura's visit, Lotor has managed to escape somehow, leaving only a hologram in his cell to fool the Alliance. With the threat of Lotor's ships and weapons looming, Keith again urges Amalgamus to deploy the Lions to stop Lotor before he becomes too powerful, but Amalgamus continues to resist in order to avoid causing a panic, instead forming a committee to investigate the matter first. In response, Lance runs off and takes the Red Lion to go after Lotor himself at the end of the first episode. When he stops to refuel in the second episode, the planet the fueling station is on gets attacked by two space pirates, the bumbling and dim-witted Queequeg and Lafitte. Lance plants a tracking device on their ship to lead him back to Lotor, but when he finally confronts Lotor's fleet, he soon finds himself overwhelmed and captured. Shortly afterward, the rest of the Voltron team gets a report on his last known location and immediately rushes off to rescue him, taking their Lions in defiance of Amalgamus's orders. They quickly manage to free Lance and the Red Lion, at which point Lotor releases a new Robeast made from the security drone that guarded him in prison. The heroes proceed to form Voltron and defeat the Robeast, while Lotor warps away to escape. The third episode begins with the opening of bogus peace negotiations between Lotor and the Alliance, and when Lotor leaves, Lance tails him into the Dream Dimension, where the Drool Prince rendezvous with Hagar. When they spot Lance, the witch traps him in a memory of his own childhood, when Lotor and Zarkon's forces attacked and burned his village. The team soon comes to the rescue after discovering an artifact that can open a portal to the Dream Dimension and help Lance break out of the illusions. As they attack Lotor's command ship, Hagar summons forth Castle Doom, where she spent the last 5 years in the Dream Dimension creating new Robeasts to unleash upon the universe. Voltron manages to defeat the Robeasts that Hagar sends after them, but she and Lotor manage to get away. And when the Lions return to the physical world, the episode ends with Amalgamus berating them for disobeying his orders and jeopardizing the peace process. After that initial arc, the series mainly followed the same kind of scheme of the week format as the original show. Most episodes revolved around Lotor and Hagar having some new scheme to attack Voltron and/or the Alliance, with the pirate duo Queequeg and Lafitte acting as their primary minions, only for our heroes to thwart their plans by the end of the episode. These plots ranged from brainwashing Hunk to turn against his teammates while sending a disguised Robeast to kidnap Amalgamus, to kidnapping a judge and using him as a hostage to lure Princess Allura to Castle Doom and blackmail her into marrying Lotor with the captive judge officiating. But there were a couple story arcs that carried over through each episode. First, Amalgamus tries multiple times to retire the Lion pilots and prevent them from interfering in his efforts to pursue a diplomatic solution, starting with him trying to replace them with androids in episode 4, and escalating to outright court-martialing them in episode 14. Meanwhile, Zarkon's redemption is revealed to be a ruse, and that Lotor was following his orders all along, so that Zarkon could use his son and Hagar as proxies to restart and escalate the war between the Alliance and Planet Doom. Over the course of the season, Zarkon manipulates Amalgamus and the heroes in order to climb the ranks of the Alliance government and turn the public against Voltron at the same time. In episode 15, Lotor takes the 3 most heavily populated worlds of the Alliance hostage at the same time, and forces Allura to allow the Alliance to be destroyed in exchange for sparing the 3 worlds and their billions of inhabitants, as well as allowing Amalgamus to destroy his war fleet. Lance tries to stop the destruction of the Red Lion, but is incapacitated and arrested for the attempt, with him being imprisoned on the same planet Lotor was locked up on at the start of the season. But when Amalgamus orders Lotor's fleet to crash themselves into a star, the ships refuse to obey his commands, and Lotor sneaks away as he orders his fleet to set course for the Galaxy Garrison headquarters. Then there was a clip show episode to recap things for the audience before the final episode of the season. In the season finale, Keith overhears Zarkon reveal that he's already given the order to execute Lance in prison and discovers the Drool King's treachery against the Alliance. As the Fleet of Doom invades the Alliance headquarters and destroys its navy, Keith, Pidge, and Hunk steal Zarkon's personal ship and fly it toward the prison planet to rescue Lance, saving him just as the security drones start shooting at him. Meanwhile, Lotor himself arrives over Eris and launches an attack on the Castle of Lions, forcing Allura and Karan to retreat into the underground tunnels beneath the castle. While looking through the underground chambers, they find an ancient archive dating back to the first ruler of Eris, her distant ancestor Queen Ariella, who built the Castle of Lions. When they enter the room, Ariella's ghost appears and tells Allura about how the robot lions were made from the spirits of real lions that once protected Eris in the distant past and served as the Queen's companions when she first came to the planet. Back at the Alliance headquarters, Zarkon's forces breach the building, and he reveals his true colors to Amalgamus before taking over as leader of the Alliance, ending the season on a cliffhanger. Then the first episode of Season 2 had the other pilots make their way back to Eris and fight their way through Lotor's forces to reach the castle. When they reunited with Allura, she was able to communicate with the lion spirits, causing the destroyed robot lions to respawn good as new, allowing their pilots to come together, form Voltron, and defeat Lotor's invasion. But Zarkon was still in power over the Galaxy Alliance, framing them for his own fleet's attack on the Garrison headquarters and declaring them fugitives. Meanwhile, the opening of the episode revealed that Zarkon was the one responsible for Amalgamus being hostile toward Voltron in the previous season by corrupting the AI's programming. After the first episode of the season, the formula for episodes was mostly the same, just with our heroes now operating as fugitives from the Garrison. Then in the 8th episode of the season, Queequeg and Lafitte decided to take Amalgamus and sell him for spare parts. This allowed the Voltron team to get the robot back and restore his original programming, after which Amalgamus publicly exposed Zarkon's treachery. The rest of the episode then focused on Voltron, Karan, and Amalgamus fighting their way through Lotor's fleet to oust Zarkon from power and liberate the Garrison headquarters. They succeeded in freeing the planet, but Zarkon got away to Castle Doom with all the Garrison's weapons and all the secrets of the Alliance's defense systems. The next episode was a regular scheme of the week, with Hagar luring the heroes into a trap using an illusion of Castle Doom and a giant spider roe-beast which the heroes ultimately defeat after breaking free of the witch's illusions. And then the series just ended after that, with 17 episodes in Season 1 and 9 in Season 2. And the reason for that is surprisingly tied into the behind-the-scenes issues of a completely different franchise. Animation for Voltron Third Dimension was done by Netter Digital Entertainment, the studio that did the visual effects on the final 2 seasons of the then recently completed sci-fi series Babylon 5. And although the animation was done as a co-production with Mike Young Productions, it was this Babylon 5 connection which ultimately led to Third Dimension's downfall. While they were working on Third Dimension, Netter was also doing visual effects for a Babylon 5 spin-off series titled Crusade as their only other client. When Crusade was cancelled in 1999 before a single episode had even aired, Netter could no longer afford to stay in business, resulting in the studio ultimately shutting down in 2000 and cutting Voltron short after only 26 episodes. Meanwhile, Third Dimension's existence landed World Events in legal trouble with Toei, who filed a lawsuit arguing that the creation of a sequel series overstepped the bounds of the original contract regarding the rights of the anime used to create Voltron. However, Toei ultimately lost the lawsuit, and in 2000, World Events purchased the rights to all 3 anime outright to prevent such conflicts from happening again in the future. Within the next 2 years, the comic book publisher Devil's Due acquired the license to make comics based on Voltron and hired Dan Jolly to write the story for a new Voltron comic series, with writer Marie Crowell serving as a periodic co-writer. There had previously been comics based on Voltron released back in 1985, published by Modern Comics, an imprint of the now defunct Charlton Comics, but that was only a 3-issue limited series that consisted of episodic tie-ins with the show. At Devil's Due, Jolly went for a fully serialized story that retold the original series and updated it for a modern audience, beginning with a 6-issue miniseries telling his take on the original show's opening episodes before moving to an ongoing monthly series. Upon learning that the 80s cartoon was adapted from 2 different anime, Jolly used the freedom he had from not having to match his dialogue with existing footage to weave the elements of both the Lion and Vehicle Voltron stories together in a more cohesive way. Unlike how the first episode of the original show began with the Lion Voltron team already arriving on Eris, the initial issue of the comic opened with the backstory of how the team came together and why they were sent on a mission to find Voltron in the first place. This prologue also gave all the main cast concrete backstories as opposed to the small tidbits that were sprinkled throughout the original series, complete with actual last names that for at least one character were carried over into subsequent iterations. In this universe, Lance Charles McLean was a pilot in the US Navy whose showboating landed him in jail after he pissed off a senator by almost hitting the guy's house during a stunt flight. Sven Holgersson was a quasi-Navy SEAL who'd been suspended over an incident where he ended up killing a man that he was supposed to extract alive. Hunk, now with the full name of Tsuyoshi Garrett, was a former engineer in the US Army working as a mechanic. Pidge, real name Daryl Stoker, was a 16-year-old child prodigy in military school for his proficiency with computers and high IQ, but no friends due to his intellect and young age. And Keith Akira Kogane was a former US Marine who'd been drifting through life on autopilot since the death of his fiancée, burying his grief in a desk job and martial arts classes. Over the course of issue 0, each of them is approached by Colonel James Hawkins of Galaxy Garrison and recruited for a top-secret mission. Meanwhile, on Eris, Allura, having renounced her royal title after the devastation of her planet during her childhood, has a dream of her father's ghost telling her that a group of strangers are coming that will bring back Voltron and help restore their planet. In the opening of issue 1, Hawkins explains how the Drool Empire ruled most of known space 1,200 years ago, before a collaboration of priests and scientists created the giant robot known as Voltron to stand up to the might of Empress Jane IX. After Voltron turned the tide against the Empire, Jane's minion, a witch named Sarga, attacked Voltron and shattered the robot. In the aftermath, a heroic magic user reportedly cast a partially successful counterspell that transformed Voltron's pieces into 5 mechanical lions and summoned them to a place of safety on planet Eris, leaving the robot to fade into myth. Though most of the group are skeptical of the idea that the legends of Voltron are real, all of them ultimately accept the mission to find it. When they reach orbit over Eris, the team encounters a Drool scout ship and engage in a brief dogfight to keep the scouts from reporting their movements back to the Drool supremacy. Though they manage to destroy the Drool scouts, their own ship takes heavy damage during the battle and crash lands on Eris, landing right next to the royal tombs outside of the Castle of Lions, and which their crash unwittingly broke open. Koran and some of the Erusians who come to investigate are furious because breaching the seal on the royal tombs is a taboo on Eris that carries the death penalty. But Allura comes along and diffuses the situation, correctly guessing that these 5 humans are the people her father's ghost spoke of in her dream. Pidge's scanner starts giving them 4 different energy readings, one of which is directly inside the tomb, and when Allura leads them in to investigate, they discover the Green Lion of Voltron hidden behind a secret wall. Before anyone can process what this means, a fresh wave of Drool scouts arrives on Zarkon's orders after Hagar warned him that something significant was happening there. When the scouts see the Green Lion, they split off to track the other 3 energy readings, while 2 of their ships remain behind to interrogate the locals, forcing the heroes to jump into action and race to get the lions before the Drools do. Sven manages to take down one ship with his laser pistol, while Keith manages to disable the crew of the other with his martial arts training, allowing the team to split up and take out multiple ships at once. Keith and Lance each manage to destroy the ships digging for the Yellow and Blue Lions, but the team ends up facing stiffer opposition when they've joined forces against the ship excavating the Red Lion, the captain of which is smart enough to listen into their communications and take out their engines. Before the Drool captain can finish them, Pidge comes to the rescue in the Green Lion, taking out the scout ship. But not before the scout manages to send out a distress message, summoning a larger Drool fleet to Eris. Meanwhile, on planet Doom, formerly known as Koronoth, Hagar experiences a vision while scrying with her magic that warns her of Voltron's return. On Eris, Pidge passes out the keys to the other Lions, but before the team can decide on what to do next, the Drool reinforcements arrive overhead and start firing on them. While Pidge holds off the enemy fleet, Lance climbs into the Red Lion while Sven and Hunk rush back to Blue and Yellow to give Pidge reinforcements. As Keith flies the stolen Drool ship back toward the battle, the rest of the team starts figuring out how to use the Lions, discovering in the process that they work through a psychic link with their pilot and making short work of the Drool fleet. Back on Koronoth, Zarkon prepares his army to respond to Voltron's return after Hagar's scrying and the destroyed scouts report the emergence of the Lions. But before he can send more ships, Lotor arrives and volunteers to handle the matter himself, dismissing his father's accusation that he's just looking for an excuse to seek out his old childhood friend, Allura. On Eris, Allura passes the time talking to her mouse companions, reimagined in this continuity as miniature robots, when the humans return with the Lions and tell her about what happened. While they're talking, Sven starts to feel ill, but brushes everyone off by insisting that he's fine, and Karan leads everyone inside the castle. As Karan gives the humans a tour and tells them about how Zarkon killed Allura's parents 13 years ago, the robot mice begin freaking out and run into the princess's bedroom. When Allura and the other pilots investigate, they find the mice opening a hidden compartment in their cage to reveal the key for the missing Black Lion. As Keith takes the key in his hand, they hear the sound of falling rocks and rush to a window as a lion statue outside crumbles away to unveil the missing Black Lion. But before they can do anything with this revelation, Sven suddenly collapses, and issue 3 ends with Pidge yelling for someone to get a doctor because Sven has stopped breathing. After an Erusian doctor manages to save Sven's life, Keith and Allura open the next issue talking about everything she and her people lost when Zarkon attacked her planet back during her childhood. Allura expresses her gratitude for how Keith and the others have given her people hope again for the first time in years, which leads to some quasi-flirting as she tries to tell him that she dreamed about him and the others before she met them. But then Lance interrupts and kills the mood, sending Allura back to her room. While Lance initially tries to apologize for getting in the way of Keith and Allura, Keith insists that there's nothing going on for him to get in the middle of, prompting Lance to comment that if Keith isn't interested in pursuing Allura, he might as well give it his own shot. When Allura returns to her bedroom, she goes to light a candle, only to find Lotor there waiting for her. Despite her attempts to order him out, Lotor tries to put the moves on her, only for Lance to walk in looking for the princess and interrupt them. Lotor retaliates by beating Lance to a pulp, but backs off when Allura stands in his way. As he departs, Lotor tells Allura to look out the window, where she and Lance manage to see an incoming coffin ship carrying a Robeast to the surface of Eris. The humans jump back into their Lions as the Robeast emerges, but as the battle goes on, the controls stop responding as all 5 Lions automatically begin to combine into Voltron, linking all of the pilots' minds together. All of them, that is, except for Sven, whose mysterious ailment is exacerbated by the transformation, causing him and the Blue Lion to fall out of formation as the energy backlash of the connection knocks him unconscious. With Sven and the Blue Lion incapacitated, the heroes open up issue 5 using their individual Lions to harry the Robeast and keep it away from both Sven and the castle. Meanwhile, Allura and Karan reach the downed Blue Lion and pull Sven from the cockpit, and while Karan is sent to get Sven to the caverns, Allura jumps back into the Blue Lion to join the fight herself. After Allura manages to disable one of the Robeast's arms, the Lions all begin to automatically converge again, combining into Voltron for the first time in centuries. With the psychic link between the Lions and their pilots, Keith and the Lion pilots form Voltron's blazing sword and manage to destroy the Robeast. As Lotor leaves the planet in his ship, the Lions separate and everyone settles down to talk about the experience of forming Voltron. While the others talk about what happened to Sven, they realize that the psychic link allowed them to experience each other's thoughts and memories while piloting to know what happened, even without Allura telling them out loud. As the team digests that little bombshell of Voltron's capabilities, Allura talks to Keith to see how he's holding up, and he reveals that after the mind meld, he feels more at home on Eris than he ever felt on Earth. And that was where the first arc wrapped up. After the opening miniseries, the comic relaunched from issue 1 as an ongoing series, beginning with a 5-part story arc subtitled Paradise Lost. We pick up 4 months after the initial miniseries, with our heroes acclimating to life on Eris as they help the planet rebuild. While most of the team has settled in and integrated pretty nicely on Eris, Sven still feels like an outsider after being rejected by the Lions, and feels like he has no place due to being the odd man out among the team that came from Earth. And that's on top of the nightmares that he has every night. Meanwhile, we continue to see Allura try to pursue Keith romantically, while Keith holds back because of his past, and Lance tries to flirt with Allura and find chances to spend time with her. As Keith and Sven share a moment commiserating over the lack of modern technology and conveniences on Eris, a lone Drool ship crash lands on the surface. When our heroes go to investigate the crash site, they find none other than Colonel Hawkins, who reveals that he'd been captured by the Drools while coming to search for them and managed to escape after stealing one of the Drool ships. Meanwhile, on Planet Doom, we see Lotor meditating before engaging in some martial arts practice, setting him up as a foil to Keith's background. When Lotor is done with his practice, Merla arrives with Hagar as an escort to rub his failure on Eris in his face before the 2 Drool women head off to have their own secret meeting. Back on Eris, Hawkins and the Lion pilots discuss his original plan to retrieve Voltron, and Allura asserts her people's claim to the Lions, refusing to let the garrison study them out of concern that Earth would try to replicate the technology as an offensive weapon. Hawkins tries to appeal to his fellow Earthlings to back him up since they wouldn't have found Voltron if he hadn't sent them on the mission in the first place, but Keith tells him that they all belong on Eris and support Allura's decision. Hawkins is frustrated, but begrudgingly accepts, while Sven walks out to brood some more about how he doesn't feel the same sense of belonging there that the rest of the team does. Then out of nowhere, a garrison strike team arrives and steals the Lions at gunpoint, taking Hawkins prisoner in the process. As he's dragged away, he swears to our heroes that he had nothing to do with this, and the team resolves to get Voltron back. While the rest of the team gears up to go back to Earth, Sven chooses to stay behind on Eris and help Karan protect the planet in the other's absence. On Earth, Hawkins finds himself being court-martialed for using garrison personnel and resources to arrange for the initial expedition without telling anyone or obtaining authorization for his plan. And as punishment, he finds himself demoted from colonel to commander. After the trial, he and his subordinate, Lieutenant Brown, discuss the outcome of the court-martial, and the lieutenant reveals that the officer who oversaw the trial, Admiral Wegner, was the one who gave the order to raid Eris and steal the Lions. We then cut back to our heroes as they finish their journey back to Earth and sneak their way into a garrison research facility, while Lotor pops into Earth's orbit in secret to basically watch the whole mess unfold up close. Once inside the base, our heroes discover that the garrison has managed to make a surprising amount of progress on replicating the technology behind Voltron in the days it took the pilots to reach Earth. When they hack into the base's computers, they discover that the garrison scientists have already managed to copy 40% of the technology and get a brief glimpse of Albagos as a failed prototype. After dealing with a pair of security guards, the team finally locates the Lions, along with a set of 15 military vehicles in the hangar next door. But before they can enter the hangar, an alarm goes off and the door seals, before Part 2 ends with the heroes turning around to see the Vehicle Voltron team charging down the hall toward them. The 2 teams fight in the hangar in Part 3, during which Chip and Pidge are surprised to see how similar to each other they look, before the Lions begin to move on their own, spooking the Vehicle Voltron team long enough for the main cast to get into their lines. The Lion Voltron team manages to escape the base, with the Vehicle Voltron team in hot pursuit. The heroes try to return the tide by forming Voltron, only for the Vehicle team to reveal their own combining robot. Faced with a foe that can keep up with them, Keith and the Lion pilots choose to focus on escaping Earth and prioritize getting away back to Eris over continuing to engage in a drawn-out battle, while the Vehicle Voltron team continues to pursue them on Admiral Wegner's orders. Meanwhile, Commander Hawkins discovers that Admiral Wegner is a spy for the Drools and responds by breaking into the man's house, tying him up, and then pulling up all the evidence he needs from the man's computer while Wegner is there in the room with him. Once Hawkins has everything he needs to prove his superior's crimes, he puts in a call to the authorities, and then grabs the fastest ship available, the SS Explorer, and sets off after the two Voltron teams to clear everything up. He eventually manages to catch up with the Vehicle Voltron team toward the end of Part 4, and fills them in on what was going on with Wegner. Meanwhile, after the Lion Voltron team manages to leave the Vehicle Voltron force in the dust, they stop at an abandoned lunar colony in another solar system to rest while the Lions recharge. But as Allura and Lance are exploring the facility, Lotor comes along, bringing a squad of Drool soldiers for backup with 3 Robeasts on standby, and attempts to pressure Allura to hand over the Lions using the threat of the potential political fallout of her stealing them from Earth. Before he can get far into his pitch, Keith intervenes and gets into a martial arts duel against Lotor, while the rest of the Voltron team deals with his soldiers. When Keith wins the duel with Lotor, the Prince responds by releasing the 3 Robeasts from their coffin ships at the end of Part 4. Then Part 5 of Paradise Lost opens with the team rushing back to their Lions and combining into Voltron to fight the Robeasts. But without enough time for the Lions to properly recharge, the team is quickly overwhelmed and on the brink of being destroyed before Vehicle Voltron comes to the rescue. After Vehicle Voltron drives back the Robeasts, Lion Voltron suddenly starts draining energy from Vehicle Voltron, restoring the original robot to full power and allowing them to engage the Robeasts on their own. They're still outnumbered though, so once the Vehicle Voltron team recovers, they get back into the fight and the 2 giant robots team up to take down the last of the Robeasts. Once the battle is over, the SS Explorer finally catches up, and the team settles down to recover from the battle while Keith and Jeff bicker over the power draining. While Hawkins tries to get the 2 team leaders to get along, Lieutenant Brown comes in with word that the prison transport carrying Admiral Wegner was hijacked. And we cut to the disgraced Admiral being delivered to Planet Doom, where Zarkon prepares to kill him now that he's outlived his usefulness. Back on Eris, Sven is still having nightmares, where a voice picks at his insecurities about how much he's truly valued by the others, and promises to love and appreciate him in return for his loyalty, which is when readers discover that the dreams that Sven has been having throughout the arc are in reality psychic projections from Hagar and Merla as the 2 women prey on his insecurities and manipulate him into turning against his teammates. And that was the end of the Paradise Lost arc. The next arc, titled Warpath, picks up a short time later with Commander Hawkins and the Vehicle Voltron team visiting Eris to help out and make amends for their past conflict. Meanwhile, Lotor and his father travel to the secret capital world of the Drool Supremacy for a summit with the other leaders of the 10 Drool Kingdoms, where their faction is called out in front of the Council for their aggression toward Eris and Voltron, and ordered to cease provoking open war with the Galactic Union before the Supremacy is ready for it. Back on Eris, Allura tracks down Keith and convinces him to go on a romantic walk with her as she joins him on his nighttime patrol of the castle grounds. But when they reach the castle's control room, they find Karan tied up while a team of Drool spies takes files from the castle's computer. As the pair attempt to fight off the spies, Sven knocks them down and reveals his change in allegiance, shooting some pipes off the ceiling to trap them as he escapes with the Drools at the end of Part 1. At the start of Part 2, the heroes and their allies discuss the aftermath of the attack, and after finding a belt buckle from one of the spies that carries the iconography of Merla's 7th Kingdom, they realize that there's a possibility that Sven didn't betray them willingly. With Sven having knowledge of all of Eris's defenses in his mind, Karan argues that if he can't be rescued, then they need to eliminate him to keep his knowledge out of the hands of the Drool Supremacy. But Keith and the other Lion pilots insist that they're going to get their friend back alive, and start hunting their way through Drool communications relays to track Sven down, while the Vehicle Voltron team stays behind to guard Eris in their absence. Meanwhile, on Planet Doom, Lotor is relaxing in his personal residence after the council meeting when Zarkon barges into his quarters and berates him for embarrassing his father, before basically grounding Lotor from leaving the planet without Zarkon's direct permission. Elsewhere, Sven rendezvous with Merla's flagship, and after a brief moment of the Drool Queen playing mind games with him, she and Hagar introduce him to Lotor after the prince sneaks away from Planet Doom in defiance of his father's threats. The 4 then travel to a secret base on the abandoned planet of Caladran, where Merla reveals her plan to have Lotor usurp Zarkon's throne and unite his kingdom with hers through marriage, and use Sven's inside knowledge to seize Voltron for themselves and take over the Supremacy. But before they can even begin debriefing Sven on what he knows, their hidden base is attacked by the rival Fifth Kingdom in an effort to assassinate Merla, forcing Sven and Lotor to work together to reach their backup ship while Hagar tends to Merla's injuries. When the two manage to get the ship in the air, the Voltron Lions arrive in a stolen Seventh Kingdom ship, leading to a fight between the two sides in orbit over the planet, which soon turns into a three-way fight when another Fifth Kingdom ship arrives under the command of Lieutenant Urak to make sure Merla is finished off. As Lotor, Sven, Urak, and Voltron are all duking it out in orbit, Hagar works on healing Merla's injuries. But while she's delirious from the pain, Merla lets it slip that even though she promised Hagar that their conspiracy would remove Zarkon from power without killing him, she's already given the order to assassinate him. Enraged at Merla's betrayal, Hagar opens a massive portal to the planet where the Robeasts are kept, unleashing 5 of them at once to attack everyone in range of Merla's base. This forces all the combatants in orbit to temporarily put aside their hostilities in order to survive, but when Urak learns that the Princess of Eris is flying in Voltron, he just can't resist stabbing the heroes in the back for his own personal gain, and launches an attack on Voltron that electrocutes Allura till she falls unconscious. While Urak is immediately destroyed by Voltron for his betrayal, his actions inadvertently allow Allura's consciousness to connect with the spirit of Voltron itself, and pull Sven into a shared mindscape where she manages to finally snap him out of Hagar and Merla's manipulation. Here, we learn that Sven was rejected by the Blue Lion because of a brain defect he'd been born with that made him incompatible with the Lion's psychic link and left him vulnerable to brainwashing. With Sven now back on the hero's side, he pilots his and Lotor's ship toward the last and largest of the attacking Robeasts, seemingly sacrificing himself in order to save his friends. But we quickly see that he was able to get into an escape pod before the ship exploded, and his pod crash-landed on a distant planet where he's found unconscious but alive by one of the planet's monarchs, Princess Romel. The last issue wrapped up with the heroes tracking the beacon of an escape pod from Sven's ship, clinging to the hope that their friend wasn't dead. Meanwhile, Merla and Hagar woke up on the other side of Hagar's portal and immediately started trying to kill each other. The search for Sven led the heroes to an abandoned Erusian ship in deep space, but instead of Sven, Allura found herself saving an injured Lotor from being executed by a rival Drool general, while Keith and Lance discovered that the ship had been rigged to explode. And then the comic got cancelled, leaving readers hanging on all those cliffhangers for 4 years until the release of the comic's Omnibus collection in 2008, which featured a bonus chapter that hastily wrapped up all the loose ends. The bonus chapter resolved the cliffhanger by revealing that the explosives, the Drool General, and even Lotor were just illusions caused when Merla used her powers to force Hagar to open another portal back to the base on Caladran. In the process, their powers combined to start generating illusions at random, and a psychic Robeast that escaped through the open portal is amplifying the illusions, causing them to pop up across the galaxy. When the Lion pilots find the real Lotor trapped inside his escape pod in the hangar, another illusion of him appears and attacks Allura, causing Lotor to figure out what happened. Meanwhile, on planet Pollux, Sven has a dream of Voltron's spirit, and wakes up telling Romel that he received a message from the robot and needs to find his friends to relay what it said. With Lotor tied up in their cockpits, the heroes make their way back to Caladran and engage the psychic Robeast in battle. However, they quickly find themselves unable to counter its telepathic abilities and fight it physically at the same time. But then Sven comes to the rescue, revealing that his dreams gave him the solution to the crisis at hand. With Keith's approval, Sven boards Voltron and makes his way to the robot's heart, where he plunges his hand into Voltron's power core, causing the psychic bonds between the pilots to give all the heroes immunity to the Robeast's mental attacks. And while Voltron finally destroys the Robeast, Lotor sneaks away to pick up Hagar before escaping back to Planet Doom. Once the day is saved, the Vehicle Voltron team heads home from Eris while our heroes reconcile with Sven and talk about what comes next. Sven decides to settle down on Pollux with Romel, but the team gives him his Voltron flight suit as a reminder that he'll always be a part of the team. Then the Castle of Lions receives a distress call about a Drool attack on a nearby planet, sending our heroes off on their next adventure. And then we end with Lotor and Hagar trying to sneak back into Castle Doom without getting caught, only for Zarkon to reveal that he already figured out that Lotor broke curfew, causing the prince to scream in agony as his punishment begins. Despite the cancellation of the main comic series, Devil's Due greenlit a sequel miniseries written by the company's president Josh Baylock titled Voltron: A Legend Forged, about our heroes going back in time and playing a role in the robot's creation. In the first issue, the Vehicle Voltron team is guarding a secret Galaxy Alliance research base when the facility is attacked and seized by space pirates. As the Vehicle Voltron team fights back against the pirates, the Lion team senses the attack through their dreams and rushes to the rescue. While the pirates attempt to breach the station and steal its cargo, Lotor shows up in a Drool warship to try and take the cargo for himself. To keep anyone else from getting it, the pirate Captain Stride fires a pair of nuclear missiles at the station, and the detonation sends a surge of energy over himself, Lotor, and Voltron. And when all parties regain consciousness, they find themselves 1,200 years in the past. After being shot down by 2 Drool scout ships, the Lions crash land on a jungle planet where they're forced to team up with Lotor in order to survive, only for all of them to wind up captured by a group of Drool barbarians, in the process discovering that they're on planet Doom long before it became the seat of Zarkon's throne. Meanwhile, Stride decides to split off and look out for himself, wandering through the jungles until he spots the ships that shot down the Lions landing to investigate the crash site. And light years away, the ancient Drool Empress Jane the Ninth is finishing up the conquest of a helpless world before communing with her goddess Sarga, who warns her of the coming of a mighty warrior born of magic and technology that will bring an end to her reign. But to avert Jane's fall, Sarga urges the Empress to find her a host in which she can inhabit the material plane. Back on Ancient Doom, the heroes are brought to the local tribe's village for interrogation, and along the way they meet a fellow prisoner in the form of a Drool priestess named Azaki, who practices a forbidden religion dedicated to worshipping a pantheon of lion gods. When they reach the village, Keith is singled out for interrogation as the team's leader, and informed that they will all be executed in the morning. But before Keith can be returned to his cell, a group of knights wearing the colors of the Voltron Lions appear and rescue him and his friends. As the knights lead them to a hidden ship, Allura tries to protest that they need to go back for their lions, only to learn that the knights are from Eris and are taking them to meet her distant ancestor, King Altaris, who as they speak is working to finish the creation of Voltron. Part 3 opens with the Drool scouts who shot down Voltron inspecting the lions, allowing Stride to steal one of their ships and kill them with it while they were distracted. But instead the ship's autopilot begins to automatically fly him toward its mothership, where he finds himself captured by Jane and strikes a deal with her to give information for his freedom. Meanwhile, the present-day Voltron pilots arrive on Eris and are introduced to Altaris, along with the other scientists and magic users involved in Voltron's creation. The magic-wielding android Cybris, the scientist mage Catman Philos, the nomadic scientist Heket, and the wizard Merlin from Earth. Yes, as in King Arthur and Camelot, that Merlin. After explaining their story to Altaris and his allies, the heroes get a moment to change and eat, during which time Lance and Azaki start to bond. But the team is soon brought down beneath the castle to witness the final stages of Voltron's construction, and in the process, the group is introduced to the Order of Knights in whose image the robot was designed. Meanwhile, back on Ancient Koronoth, the Lions all move on their own to group together and generate a force field around themselves for protection until their pilots return. En route to Planet Doom, Jane communes with Sarga on her flagship and learns of Voltron's threat to her rule. When they arrive, she dispatches her armies to launch an all-out invasion to conquer the planet and add it to her empire, while the Erusian Knights and the time-traveling Lion pilots rush back to retrieve the Lions. While the battle rages, Sarga orders Jane to capture Allura as a host for the Dark Goddess, but Stride tries to double-cross her forces and save his own skin, saving Allura when one of the Drool soldiers tries to take her from the battlefield. But understandably, nobody trusts him, so Lotor is tasked with guarding him to make sure he doesn't betray them either. Eventually, our heroes fight their way back to the Lions and combine into Voltron before returning to Eris with Lotor, Stride, and the Erusian guards. And Jane reacts to the loss by dropping a bomb on Planet Doom that devastates the environment, causing its desolate appearance in the present day. As the heroes fly back to Eris, Stride activates a hidden body cam in his armor to transmit his location to Jane so that she can follow them back to Eris and destroy the original Voltron before it can be finished. After getting back to Eris, the pilots of the present-day Voltron help to channel energy into the past version in the hopes that it will assist in the creation of the original robot, while Stride gets thrown in the dungeon so that he won't be underfoot. In response, he uses a pouch of sand that Jane had secretly given him to create a summoning circle inside his cell, allowing the Drool Empress to portal into the castle's dungeon and ambush Merlin, Altaris, and Cybers while they're in the middle of trying to bring Voltron to life. With Stride's help, Jane manages to disable all of Voltron's creators one by one, and use her magic to pull Allura from the Blue Lion's cockpit before summoning Sarga into the princess's body. But the process is interrupted when Ozaki jumps into the path of Jane's magic, revealing in the process that the Drool Priestess is secretly the Empress's own daughter. Jane is furious with her daughter and prepares to kill Ozaki for her interference, but Lotor shoots the Empress through the shoulder to protect Allura. As Altaris despairs over Jane ruining generations of work, we soon discover that in spite of her interference, the idea of bringing the original Voltron to life by channeling energy from its future self actually worked, and the giant robot comes to life for the first time. Jane immediately retreats to lick her wounds and plan her next move, but the next time she tries to commune with Sarga, she discovers that in the absence of Allura, the goddess has taken her daughter as a host instead. Meanwhile, in the present, the Garrison spends the miniseries figuring out where and when Voltron went back in time, and sends a probe into the past that tracks down the time travelers just as they finish dealing with Jane, and starts generating energy to bring them home. Only for Voltron and its pilots to wind up stuck on 21st century Earth instead at the end of the final issue, once again leaving this continuity off on a cliffhanger. While Devil's Due was publishing their Voltron comics, World Events began working on developing a live-action movie based on the original cartoon. In July 2005, they had secured a producer for the film in the form of Mark Gordon, a man known for producing a variety of movies and TV shows ranging from Saving Private Ryan and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen to Grey's Anatomy and Criminal Minds. And by 2007, the production company New Regency was in talks with Gordon's company to develop and film the movie. But then in August 2007, Toei reached out to World Events expressing the concern that while World Events was now the sole rights holder for the animation of the original series, Toei still felt that they were entitled to a say in planning a live-action adaptation. As a result, World Events filed a lawsuit against Toei in February 2008, alleging that Toei's attempt at claiming a stake in the rights to a live-action film directly caused New Regency to back out of negotiations. The legal mess appeared to have been settled by 2010, when early concept art was released and a bidding war started up again over a deal to produce the film. But while World Events secured a deal with Atlas Entertainment and Relativity Media in 2011 to finally make the movie, progress unfortunately continued to stall due to an inability to finalize a script. As a result, the movie slipped into development purgatory, where it remained for about a decade and has only now finished production this year with a completely different crew and production company than it started out with. While this was all happening on the movie front, World Events was also trying to work on making another animated Voltron series. The ball started rolling in 2005, with animation studio Kickstart Productions developing test footage based on the Devil's Due comics. World Events planned on pitching the series to networks at the TV trade show MIPCOM in October 2005, with the goal of starting production on a full show by the end of the year, but those plans unfortunately fell through and the project never got off the ground. Nevertheless, both World Events and Kickstart continued to work together over the next 5 years in order to develop another animated Voltron series, partnering with entertainment company Classic Media along the way. And in 2010, Nickelodeon announced that their Nicktoons channel would be premiering a new animated series dubbed Voltron Panthera Force to be released the following year. Instead of doing exclusively 2D or 3D animation like either of the previous shows, the series would combine both styles of animation by having the robots, monsters, and spacecraft be 3D models, while the characters and environments would be hand-drawn. And unlike how previous continuities focused exclusively on the cast of the original cartoon, Panthera Force was pitched as a show about the next generation, centered around 5 new recruits learning to pilot the Lions under the mentorship of the original cast. but as development progressed, the show underwent a few evolutions before it was finally released to the public. Only a month after being announced, the title was shortened from Voltron Panthera Force to just Voltron Force, and the main cast was slimmed down from 5 pilots in the new generation of heroes to just 3. Daniel, an impulsive Voltron fanboy who tends to jump into things without asking questions, who ends up being the main protagonist of the series. Vince, the science guy of the trio who serves as the Pidge of the next generation but lacks confidence in his decisions. And Larmina, a headstrong warrior who's the best fighter of the group and enjoys combat, but like Daniel, doesn't always think things through. And she also happens to be Allura's niece, even though Allura never mentioned any siblings in Defender of the Universe. Like Third Dimension, Voltron Force was framed as being the same continuity as the original cartoon, but also like Third Dimension, it featured character and story details that were not compatible with the lore of Defender of the Universe, and ignored almost everything after the end of the Go Lion season. Not to mention that Zarkon and Hagar were completely absent from the series. The first episode opens with a series of flashbacks showing Daniel and a couple friends watching the Voltron Lions battle a Robeast in the streets on Earth before Voltron took the fight to King Lotor on Planet Doom and brought an end to his reign. But while Daniel was attending the victory celebration, he watched as the Lions went haywire and started shooting at buildings. In reaction, the Lions were quickly subdued by Galaxy Garrison forces, while the public immediately turned on Voltron, and the Lions were decommissioned by the Garrison's Sky Marshal, Wade. Years later, with his dream of one day piloting the Black Lion out of reach, Daniel enrolled at the Galaxy Alliance Flight Academy in the hopes of being able to fly fast ships, only to spend most of his days stuck in slow, boring classes. Once we're caught up to the present, Daniel's inner monologue of the opening flashbacks gets interrupted by the teacher asking him a question that he wasn't paying enough attention to know the answer for. After his classmate Vince secretly gives him the answer, Lance enters the classroom, now a flight instructor for the Garrison. And through Daniel questioning him about what happened to Voltron, we learn that after the incident, which also resulted in Wade banning all mention of the name Voltron, Pidge and Hunk have also taken up work for the Garrison, while Allura has returned to Eris to govern her planet. Meanwhile, Keith is a wanted fugitive whose whereabouts are unknown. At which point, we cut to Keith meeting up with a black market contact on a sunny tropical beach to buy intel on the location of a secret Garrison base, only for his contact to turn around and sell him out. Keith summons an energy sword from a gauntlet on his forearm and fights his way out before stealing a tourist's hoverbike and flying away, breaking through the ceiling and revealing that the beach was inside a holographic dome on an asteroid in deep space. Back at the Garrison, Daniel argues back as Lance repeats the Garrison's official stance on the Lions and why the former pilots are working against their ex-team leader, culminating in Daniel and Vince getting called into Wade's office. Daniel tries to take the blame to protect his classmate, but Wade lectures him about the Garrison needing soldiers who will follow orders rather than their feelings or conscience, and assigns them to latrine duty for the rest of the school year for mentioning Voltron. Then while cleaning toilets, Daniel and Vince get to know each other better and actually become friends. On their way back to the dorms after finishing their punishment for the day, they pass by the flight simulators and decide to sneak in for a race when they see that the room is unlocked. But while the two are racing in the simulation, Lance unexpectedly joins them and causes the physical simulators to actually start flying out of the room. Lance then leads the two teens to a secret underground base where he, Pidge, and Hunk are running a resistance against Wade while pretending to be loyal members of the regime. Pidge reveals that they suspect Wade was the one who sabotaged the Lions at the victory celebration, causing them to go haywire on purpose as a pretext to have Voltron shut down and the Lions grounded back on planet Eris. The two cadets are then sent to infiltrate Wade's office and steal the pin off the Sky Marshal's jacket while the man is in the bathroom. After getting the pin, they end up confronted by a pet lion that Wade keeps for some reason, but manage to escape after a brief chase. From there, Lance takes them off campus on a stolen shuttle and reveals that the pin was actually the keys to all of the Lions except for Black. While that was all happening on Earth, Keith discovered that his contact managed to slip him the coordinates he was looking for anyway, and used them to infiltrate an underground base on one of Saturn's moons, where he finds the Black Lion being studied by Garrison scientists. As the cadets are welcomed on Eris by Allura, Keith liberates the Black Lion and flies off into space at the end of the episode. The second episode starts with a Drool ship investigating a nebula in the shape of Hagar's face, and their fleet commander, Kala, orders them to extract a sample from it. When they fire a probe at the nebula, it turns into a wormhole that promptly sucks up both the probe and the ship that launched it, before spitting out a small pink drop of an unknown liquid, referred to as Hagarium by Mayhawks, the mad scientist working with Kala. Meanwhile on Eris, Allura finishes giving the cadets a tour of the castle before bringing them to a classroom where she introduces them to her niece Larmina. After a brief recap of the Lions, the princess gives each of them their Voltcom devices, gauntlets which link to the Lions, generate holo-weapons, hack into computers, generate disguises, and all kinds of other functions as the plot demands. After that introduction, Lance takes over for a hand-to-hand combat lesson, asking the three cadets to spar each other so he can see what skill level each of them is at. When the two boys start bickering over which of them will be the one who has to hit a girl, Larmina takes them both on at once and beats them repeatedly. Meanwhile, Keith is on his way back to Eris in the Black Lion when a squad of Garrison fighters pursues him to take back the Lion. As the pursuing fighters communicate with Wade, the Marshal learns that Pidge, Hunk, and Lance have gone AWOL and puts a warrant out for their arrest, forcing Pidge and Hunk to evacuate their underground bunker on Earth and head off into space to link up with Keith. While the cadets continue their training, we cut to Mayhawks and Kala on planet Doom, as Mayhawks uses the Hagarium they've harvested to resurrect King Lotor. After catching Lotor up on what he missed while he was dead, Kala and Mayhawks then launch a Robeast toward Eris to attack the Voltron force. With only two of the Lion pilots on-world, Lance and Allura soon find themselves overwhelmed when they confront the Robeast alone, forcing the cadets to grab the keys for the Green and Yellow Lions and jump into the fight to help. Meanwhile, Keith finally manages to shake off his pursuers, as he, Pidge, and Hunk work on getting the Black Lion powered on again as they tow it to Eris. Once Keith arrives, his Lion manages to single-handedly tear the Robeast's head off, and the team returns to the castle, where Daniel finally gets to meet his idol. Back on planet Doom, Lotor threatens Mayhawks for the failure of the Robeast, before Kala reveals that the one they sent out was an older model used as disposable cannon fodder to draw Voltron out of hiding. Mayhawks then reveals that he's constructing a new generation of Robeasts by combining intelligent minds with the abilities of creatures found in nature, which he demonstrates by fusing Kala with a venomous spider against her will as the episode ends. The third episode opens with Sky Marshal Wade speaking with the Alliance's council and calling for Voltron to be destroyed, before unveiling an army of remotely piloted robot soldiers that take Koran into custody as the representative of Eris. Meanwhile, Lotor and Mayhawks observe the new armies of Planet Doom loading themselves up into warships, as both Doom and the Garrison make preparations to destroy Voltron. Back on Eris, Allura, Keith, and Lance discuss what to do about the threat of Planet Doom, while the cadets sneak around the castle exploring, and during their exploration, Vince begins exhibiting some sort of supernatural powers while discovering King Alfor's tomb. While exploring, the kids eavesdrop on their mentor's conversation when a squad of Wade's robots arrives to arrest the Voltron force. Wade threatens Koran to force the three to surrender, while the cadets sneak away to get Pidge and Hunk. As the head of the Garrison holds the three Voltron pilots prisoner, Wade reveals that he doesn't care about the Alliance, and his only priorities are power and profit. While Pidge and Vince remain in the hangar to work on getting the Black Lion back to full working order, Hunk accompanies Daniel and Larmina to rescue Keith, Lance, and Allura. They manage to defeat Wade's robot soldiers inside the castle, but he still has more stationed out in the city. However, that is the moment where Lotor and the Drool army choose to invade the planet and attack the city. Unable to stomach hearing the screams of her people, Larmina runs out onto the battlefield while the others rush to their lions, with the sole exception of Keith, who joins Larmina on the battlefield while the Black Lion is still not in good shape. Pidge leaves his work on the Black Lion to go rush to his seat in the Green one, while Vince's supernatural abilities somehow manage to restore the Black Lion. And with Lance's arm being in a cast after the Robeast fight in the previous episode, he's forced to sit in the Red Lion's passenger seat while Daniel flies. The Lions soon find themselves in combat with the Spider Kala Robeast, and the Hagarium in its webs and weapons weakens the Lions as Mayhawks explains to Lotor that it's basically kryptonite to Voltron. At the sight of the Lions and a Robeast fighting on Eris, Wade deploys a bigger, heavily armed replica of the Black Lion in the hopes of destroying both Voltron and the Robeast. However, Wade's lion is quickly overwhelmed by the spider robeast and cocooned with it, while Kala's attacks cause the remote piloting link that Wade controls all his forces through to shut down. Then when the lions open fire on the cocoon, it bursts open to reveal the two robots now merged into one. With Keith and Larmina freed up from fighting in the city now that Wade's robots are down, the lions keep the combined robot occupied while Daniel uses his Voltcom to give himself a speed boost to run back to the castle and fly the Black Lion once they hear Vince fixed it. After the Black Lion arrives on the battlefield, Keith takes over the pilot seat, and together the original team forms Voltron for the first time in years. But with the other lions weakened by Hagarium, it isn't enough, and Voltron is overwhelmed while the robeast attempts to repeat the cocoon fusion move. Suddenly, Vince's powers activate again, restoring all of Voltron to full strength, allowing the team to summon the Blazing Sword and skewer the robeast. With the spider monster down, Lotor's forces retreat, while the lions carry the beast into orbit and throw it at the retreating Drool fleet before it explodes. Then back on Earth, Karan unties himself and walks out of Wade's office, declaring his intent to restore the leadership of the Alliance to just hands, only for Wade to clench his fists ominously as he regains consciousness. Meanwhile, in Erusian orbit, the scattered pieces of the spider robeast start pulling themselves back together with Hagarium. And on the surface, Allura ends the three-part opening arc with an inspirational speech about the new generation's contributions and the future to come. Following the triple-episode pilot, the series settles into the same Adventure of the Week format as the previous shows. Most episodes involve the heroes attempting in some way to either undermine Wade's tyrannical takeover of the Alliance, or fight off Lotor's various schemes to get revenge against Voltron for his defeat as he and Mayhawks work to collect Hagarium and rebuild Castle Doom. Throughout these battles, Lotor dies and gets resurrected multiple times, and in several battles against Voltron he uses the Hagarium to take progressively larger and more monstrous forms. And along the way, the original heroes spend time teaching the next generation the skills and values needed for them to one day take over piloting the Lions. Over the course of the show, a few noticeable shifts occur as the overarching plot of the next generation learning to succeed the original cast moves along. First, in Episode 5, Vince's powers are explained as the result of being a descendant of an extinct alien species that built Voltron, which gives him access to the same energy. In the same episode, he figures out how to use those powers to give Voltron the ability to change which lion becomes the head and torso when they combine, which unlocks new abilities and weapons based on which lion is currently in the center of the formation, like magma pistols with red, a double-sided trident with a freeze ray for blue, and for yellow, a pair of flails with chainsaw propeller wings. In Episode 13, Wade is finally defeated and arrested after attempting to seize control of Voltron for himself, leaving Lotor and Mayhawks as the main threats. Then Episode 21 has Daniel get poisoned by Hagarium through a complicated series of events involving having his consciousness transplanted into Voltron and gaining a mind link with Vince, followed by the robot almost getting devoured by the Spider Kala robeast. Even as Daniel tries to keep his condition a secret from his mentors, his infection gets worse over the next 3 episodes, to the point where he starts having periodic visions of what Lotor and other Hagarium-infused beings are up to. Episode 22 reveals that Keith is at least part Erusian on his father's side, rather than fully human like he'd previously thought. Which is followed by Allura stepping back from her role as the Blue Lion's pilot in Episode 23 to become Queen of Eris, at which point Larmina is formally promoted to take her aunt's place as pilot of the Blue Lion. Meanwhile, Vince is promoted to Green Lion pilot when Pidge retires in Episode 24. Then at the start of Episode 25, Lotor and Mayhawks finish reconstructing Castle Doom, and Lotor promptly fires the mad scientist for his repeated failures against Voltron. Meanwhile, the original Voltron pilots discuss which of them Daniel will be a good fit to replace, while Allura basically proposes to Keith by asking him to become her king consort now that they know he's an Erusian like her. With Daniel seeing his Hagarium infection as an obstacle to finally being promoted to full member of the Voltron force, he enlists the help of Larmina and Vince to find a way to get rid of it by tracking down and killing Spider Kala. Back on planet Doom, Mayhawks is still knocking on the gates of Castle Doom in the hopes of getting Lotor to change his mind, when Kala arrives and tries to kill the mad scientist for turning her into a robeast. Lotor gets mad at Kala for damaging his castle after all the work that went into rebuilding it, and when she dismisses him, they start attacking each other as much as she tries to go after Mayhawks. Sensing Kala trying to absorb Lotor during the fight, Daniel tells the others that something is going down on Planet Doom, causing all the heroes to rush to their lines to investigate, with Daniel riding along in black as Keith's co-pilot. When they arrive, they find Lotor fused with the Kala Robeast, and in the ensuing battle, Daniel manages to use his Hegarium-induced vision to predict Lotor's movements, giving them the upper hand. Eventually, Keith hands over the controls mid-battle so that Daniel can give out orders more effectively, but Lotor soon manages to figure out what's going on and exploit the connection from his end. To counteract Lotor's influence, Daniel leans on Vince and Larmina for help, and together they manage to form Voltron's Blazing Sword to finally destroy the fused Combiner Robeast, apparently curing Daniel's Hegarium poisoning in the process. Back on Eris, Keith retires as pilot of the Black Lion and formally passes the reins of the team to Daniel, and everyone celebrates Lotor's apparently final defeat. But Mayhawks resurrects Lotor one more time before revealing that the new Castle Doom was actually a giant Robeast made in Mayhawks' own tentacled image, which promptly crushes Lotor before flying off into space as Planet Doom cracks apart behind it. Then the season finale opens with the Castle Doom Robeast attacking Earth and destroying the Alliance headquarters. The Voltron force immediately mobilize in response to Karan's call for help, but they quickly run into problems, because Daniel is now insecure about the fact that he only got the promotion to Black Lion pilot by relying on a mind link with Lotor, causing him to act reckless and over-aggressive in his desperation to prove that he deserves the new position on his own merits. Which predictably ends with the Lions being separated and Daniel knocked unconscious. With Voltron struggling, Allura goes to her father's ghost for guidance, who promptly activates the Castle of Lions spaceship form, allowing the rest of the original team to fly to Earth. Keith promptly commandeers control of the Black Lion and has the team reform Voltron, allowing them to finally defeat Mayhawks for good. While everyone else celebrates, Daniel hands the position of Black Lion pilot back to Keith, accepting the team's decision that he isn't ready for the leadership position just yet, though he still gets to take the Black Lion on training exercises. We then cut to the team doing one such exercise, only for Daniel to turn out to not be as free of Hegarium as he thought he was, causing him to turn on his team and attack them with the Black Lion as the episode ends. And then the show got cancelled because even though World Events wanted to make a second season, they couldn't secure funding for it. The specifics of just why there was no funding for a Season 2 have never been confirmed, but it's likely what happened with the live-action Voltron movie played a role in it. In mid-2010, a few months before the bidding started over who got to make the movie, World Events signed a deal with Mattel to produce toys based on Voltron, with one wave based on the classic series, while plans were in the works to produce toys based on the new animated show. This push also coincided with an attempted multimedia Voltron campaign, which included tie-in comics from Viz Media that took place between episodes of Voltron Force, along with video games developed by THQ based on episodes of both Voltron Force and the original cartoon, only one of which would actually be finished and released in 2011. And while Mattel showed off prototypes based on the Voltron Force versions of the Lions, the show's toy line never made it into mass production. With no other toy designs coming since the movie was in development purgatory, Mattel likely had no incentive to continue a contract that wasn't making them any money, so when the time came to renew, they simply walked away instead. And since Voltron was unfortunately one of those shows that relied on toy sales for funding, no toys obviously meant their budget took a major hit from which it never recovered. While the show's tie-in comics kept releasing until February 2013, fans of Voltron Force were left without any resolution of the last episode's cliffhanger until 2014, where a book celebrating the franchise's 30th anniversary had a comic at the end of the book that picked up where the show left off. The comic opens during the final episodes of the show after Mayhawks flies away from Planet Doom, and shows Hagar's cat Kova appearing out of nowhere and approaching Lotor's corpse before telekinetically moving it into a Robeast coffin and flying away before Doom explodes. The story then jumps ahead 3 months as the Voltron team continues practicing with the Lions while Daniel has been catatonic ever since he attacked the team at the end of the show. As he watches the team do a practice flight outside the window of his room in the medical bay, a voice whispers that his friends have forsaken him, and urges him to take what rightfully belongs to him. Urged on by the mysterious voice, Daniel destroys the medical robot tending to him and escapes from the hospital room, sending the team scrambling around the castle to search for him. As the heroes search for Daniel, Vince finds Kova in a storage room, and the cat proceeds to claw one of his eyes out, while the castle's defenses begin to trap and turn on the Voltron force as Daniel deactivates the planet's force fields. Larmina tries to stop Daniel, but gets blasted aside with a burst of energy. And as Robeasts rain down on the defenseless planet Eris, the voice thanks Daniel for his help, describing how it drifted for years as pure energy before Daniel came along, providing it, or rather her, with a conduit to gather strength. Hagarium then pours out of every opening on Daniel's face as he loses consciousness, and the glowing purple substance coalesces in front of him into the form of none other than Hagar herself. As the witch triumphantly announces her return, Vince rushes into the room just in time to watch as a Robeast Lotor tears open a hole in the castle's wall and carries Hagar, Kova, and Daniel away. We then transition to Vince years down the line, now sporting a cybernetic eye, as he narrates what transpired since that fateful day. How the Robeast attack devastated Eris, forcing Allura to stay behind and rebuild her world, while the rest of the team left to seek out a mythical world where Voltron's power was said to originate from in order to upgrade the robot and match Hagar's strength. Over the course of their journey, the Voltron force has continued battling King Lotor and the forces he amassed, including Drool pirates and Hagar's new Robeast army. Meanwhile, Daniel has been brainwashed so thoroughly that he now fights alongside the Drool forces against his former friends. But despite everything, Vince refuses to give up hope for him. And that was where the Voltron Force continuity has been left hanging, again, ever since. While Voltron Force was airing, the license for Voltron Comics passed from Devil's Due Publishing to Dynamite Entertainment as part of World Events' planned multimedia push. Writer Brandon Thomas, who'd written for an assortment of comics at Marvel and DC, including Shatterstar, Robin, and Spider-Man Unlimited, was working for Dynamite at the time, and came up with ideas for a new Voltron comic reboot that he subsequently pitched to World Events. His pitch was at least partially successful, as Dynamite began publishing a new Voltron comic series in December 2011 with Thomas as head writer. Picking up years after the original team's arrival on Eris, the main comic was a gritty reimagining of the original series with more overt violence and sexual content to aim the series at an adult audience. And halfway through the release of the first arc, Thomas began simultaneously writing a separate miniseries titled Voltron Year 1, released from April to December of 2012, which served as a prequel going into the backstory of the main cast. In the main comic, the first 6-issue story arc opened with Zarkon launching an invasion of Earth in the year 2124. Team Voltron shows up to fight the Drool invasion force, helping to protect civilians on the ground while Voltron somehow battles Robeasts all by itself. While the pilots manage to succeed in evacuating civilians and fighting off the ground troops, Voltron is overwhelmed and captured before being taken back to Zarkon's base camp. But just before Voltron falls, the robot actually speaks, telling Zarkon that he cannot change what happened and that his actions will not bring them back. As our heroes race to get Voltron back and thwart the Drool invasion of Earth, readers are treated to a series of flashbacks interwoven with the present-day scenes that shed light on Earth's involvement with the war between Doom and Eris and the history of Voltron. Starting with the reveal that in the ancient year of 2012, a human scientist named Dr. Elliot Zarkon was recruited by the US government to help defend the planet against a mysterious alien threat that had infiltrated Earth, later revealed to be the Drools of Planet Doom. During this time, the planet was visited by the Erusian battle mage Alexander Sigis, who became a close friend of Dr. Zarkon and shared his magical knowledge with humanity, allowing the garrison to create Voltron using their technology and Eris's magic. After the robot's creation, Zarkon served as Voltron's first pilot, battling Robeasts from Planet Doom over the course of several years, while Sigis tutored Zarkon's oldest son in magic. Then one day, Drool assassins murdered Zarkon's wife and children, driving him to go AWOL from Earth on a quest to get revenge. But when he reaches Planet Doom, he quickly finds himself captured, tortured, and gradually mutated into the alien Zarkon that readers know from the original cartoon. Over the course of his interrogation, the Drools reveal to Zarkon that Eris had been watching Earth for years before Sigis made contact, and that the Erusians have a history of manipulating less advanced races into building Voltron robots for them, both in their own universe and others. Though the reasons for the deception are never explained, Zarkon eventually comes to believe that his captors were telling the truth. So after he broke free, killed his tormentors, and fought his way to the top of the Drool hierarchy, Zarkon dedicated himself to exposing the skeletons in Eris's closet and revealing the truth behind why the war began. When Zarkon in the present inspects the Black Lion from his base on Earth's artificial second moon, we soon learn in the third issue that the voice which spoke from Voltron 2 issues ago was Sigius himself, whose spirit was bound to the Black Lion after his death. He and Zarkon spend most of issues 3 and 4 arguing with each other over what happened, while Zarkon tries to pull Sigius out of the Black Lion so that he and his forces can control Voltron themselves. However, Keith and the rest of the main heroes manage to breach Zarkon's base over the course of issue 4 and recover their lions at the start of issue 5. And in response to his failure to sever his old friend from the Black Lion, Zarkon orders his forces to retreat back to Planet Doom. However, Lotor defies his father's orders and attempts to drop their command center onto the planet like a meteor to devastate life on Earth, and the heroes rush to slow its crash while Lotor escapes. The heroes manage to save Earth just in the nick of time, but Lance ends up being badly injured during the fight, only recovering by the start of issue 6. On Planet Doom 3 days later, Zarkon broods in his castle over their failure when a hooded figure infiltrates the Citadel to kill Zarkon as revenge for the death of a loved one at the hands of his army. Knowing his time has come, Zarkon told the figure about his past, explaining how the figure's attempt at revenge will never satisfy him. After the figure debates the justification that Zarkon gives for his actions, the figure shoots the King of Planet Doom dead, before taking off his own hood to reveal the face of Sven. Now, before moving on to the second arc, let's talk about the prequel comic, whose characters and lore details play a small role in the second arc. In Voltron Year 1, the main team is established as a group of secret agents working for Galaxy Garrison to hunt and eliminate threats to the Alliance. Sven was the squad's original leader, with Lance as his second-in-command, Pidge as the tech expert, Hunk as the muscle, and Keith as the guy in the chair. After Garrison General Evers has them carry out a string of missions to ostensibly assassinate members of a terrorist organization that poses a danger to the Alliance, Sven discovers that their targets were never terrorists at all. Instead, the people they've been killing were former agents like them who used to serve under General Evers, and were now being eliminated in order to silence them. After investigating old files in secret, the team discovers that Earth got its position as leader of the Alliance through the Garrison sending teams of agents to blow up planets and forcibly displace alien species that were tactically useless but in the way of profitable trade routes. And that Evers was the officer in charge of overseeing those operations. Over the course of the comic, Sven is shown struggling with nightmares about failing his team, and is taking illicit drugs to medicate himself. A fact which Evers discovers at the end of issue 4 after watching security footage of Sven's girlfriend breaking up with him over it. Then at the start of issue 5, Sven learns that Pidge and Hunk's extraction from their off-world VIP escort mission was cancelled, with General Evers' name on the order. When Sven confronts the General about it, he tries to blackmail Evers by threatening to release all the evidence they've gathered on his dirty deeds, only for Evers to turn it back on him and threaten the people he cares about in an effort to make Sven back down. But before their confrontation can go any further, the Garrison is attacked by a group of alien cyborgs that begin infecting everyone in the base. Which happens right as Pidge and Hunk return with their VIP escort, as we learn the cancelled extraction was because they missed their spaceflight back to Earth and had to rebook passage on another ship. In the chaos of the attack, Sven and Evers are quickly forced to put aside their differences in order to survive, as they and the rest of the squad work to defeat the cybernetic threat. After the incursion is defeated, the two manage to come to an arrangement. Knowing that Sven's drug habit will discredit any accusations the team would make against him, Evers agrees not to have Sven tested, and Sven gets to keep his team together. In exchange, Sven agrees to step down as squad leader, and since the Garrison leadership doesn't trust Lance in the position, he promotes Keith to succeed him as commander of their team.
Keith, if I don't make it out of here, I want you to lead Voltron.
After Sven delivers the news, Keith begins reviewing the briefing for the team's next mission, the one that will ultimately take them to planet Eris in search of Voltron, which the Garrison higher-ups were attempting to use as a way of eliminating them to prevent any chance of them trying to leak Ever's secrets in the future. Getting back to the main comic, the second story arc picks up after a 10-month time skip following the end of the first one. At the start of the arc in issue 7, Lotor returns to Earth professing himself to be a changed man, reinventing himself as a politician, and offering reparations to humanity for his past actions by providing resources to help rebuild the planet. Keith, Lance, and Pidge are convinced that all of it's a trick and that Lotor should not be trusted. However, Allura is willing to consider the possibility that he's being genuine, arguing that Lotor might have felt trapped by Zarkon's way of doing things and was only able to move forward now that his father was no longer in the picture. But before she and Keith can argue about it any further, a giant Voltron-like robot appears on Earth's original moon, one that Allura appears to recognize and knew was coming, but was expecting on a much longer timetable. When they fly up to the moon to confront the robot, it attacks them, leading to a brutal fight that completely destroys the natural satellite. In the aftermath, Keith jumps to the conclusion that Lotor was responsible for the attack, and orders the Garrison to arrest the Drool King. Meanwhile, back in Washington, D.C., Lotor and Hagar discuss Lotor's tenure as king, and at Lotor's urging, Hagar shapeshifts into Allura to tell him with the princess's voice that his actions will ensure more people will live than perish if his plan succeeds. We then cut to morning on Planet Doom as a civilian Drool couple look out on their balcony to see blood raining from the sky, and the same robot launch an attack on the planet's capital city, before we soon find out that Commander Merla is the one in control. When the Voltron force makes it back to Earth, Keith is informed that because of Lotor's diplomatic status, the Garrison won't arrest him or do the intensive military interrogation Keith wants, instead arranging for an unofficial meeting with Lotor and the Speaker of the US Senate. Despite Keith's best efforts to provoke Lotor and goad him into taking responsibility, Lotor denies any knowledge of where the robot came from or who created it. Afterward, Keith tries to hyper-analyze how Lotor's face looked when he talked about Zarkon's death, despite Lance being convinced that Keith is reading too much into things. But before they can continue trying to prove Lotor guilty, Allura calls them and tells them to get to a news feed, and they rush back into the office and turn on the news to see a broadcast of the mystery robot's attack on Planet Doom. While Lance goes to get the rest of the team ready to launch, Keith heads off on his own, telling Lance that he has to check on something. Once Keith is alone, an invisible assailant attacks him before he uses some form of magic to lower their disguise and overpower the assassin before snapping their neck. As the assassin's body disintegrates, Keith contacts the team and tells Allura that he's figured out the mystery robot is heading for Eris. When they arrive on Eris in issue 10, Voltron confronts the robot, and Keith demands that whoever's piloting it tell them what Lotor is doing. However, Merla, with her voice disguised, claims that the robot is acting on behalf of Earth and the Galaxy Alliance. Meanwhile, Lotor returns to Planet Doom and looks out at the devastation that Merla's attack inflicted on the capital. After being informed of the current estimated death toll, he contacts her on a secure channel demanding that she explain herself. When Lotor castigates her for killing 10,000 of their people, Merla retorts that he told her to leave no doubt, and that nobody would accept his attempt at allying Doom with the Alliance without enough bloodshed on their own side. While Lotor is still angry at Merla for making that decision on her own without his input, he's forced to allow her to continue fighting on Eris in order to prevent the Voltron pilots from capturing her. Voltron manages to damage Merla's mech by cutting off one of its arms, forcing her to escape into a wormhole while the pilot of the Lion that made up the lost arm takes their own life with a suicide capsule. Hours later, Keith is shown having a conversation to Thin Air, talking about his suspicions of Lotor and something else going on that he's keeping a secret from his teammates related to something called the Third Sphere. At which point the issue ends with the reveal that Keith is actively communicating with the ghost of Alex Sigis. Issue 11 then opens with Keith waking up in the middle of the night on Eris before taking the Black Lion off-world in the middle of the night and heading out to track down Sven. When Allura sees that Keith has left, she tells her nanny to inform Karan that she'll be heading down to her father's tomb. Karan tries to evade her, first by avoiding her summons and then by feigning ignorance of what she's trying to do, but she cuts through his excuses and orders the Erusian mystics to summon her father's spirit. Meanwhile, Keith locates Sven, and after a brief argument about the fact that Keith planted a tracker on his former commander, Keith reveals what he's been learning from Sigis. that there's a secret third party in the war between the Erusians and the Drools that has manipulated the conflict for their own benefit with sinister intentions, and is determined to keep their existence a secret at any cost. Back on Eris, Allura finally gets to speak to King Alfor's ghost, and through their conversation, the audience learns that the rulers of Eris made a metaphorical deal with the devil, and have been locked into an alliance with the Third Sphere for generations. Allura is frustrated by her father's insistence on keeping their people's skeletons in the closet, and advocates to tell Keith everything so that she and her friends can come up with a plan to stop the Third Sphere. However, her father protests, desperate to protect her from the sphere, and even resorts to using magic to turn her words into gibberish whenever she tries to speak about the details. In response, Allura tells her father that Eris's actions will be brought to light, and that she won't be coming back to his tomb any longer. While Allura talks to her father, Keith convinces Sven to return to Earth and help him in his investigation of the Third Sphere, faking Sven's death in order to help him avoid suspicion during their search. In the 12th issue, Keith starts to distance himself from the team in order to protect them, taking a position on Earth under General Evers, training the pilots for 2 new Voltron robots built and crewed by Galaxy Garrison with funding and raw materials provided by Lotor. While Keith continues to push his teammates away to protect them from the Third Sphere, readers finally learn that Lotor is ultimately working toward the same goal that Keith and Allura are. And after torturing Merla for a bit to punish her for disobeying the spirit of his orders, Lotor sends her on a mission to bring back another universe's version of Voltron in preparation for the next phase of his plan to defeat the Sphere. Meanwhile, over the course of issue 12, Hunk begins drafting a resignation letter expressing that as a result of Keith's keeping secrets from them and Sven's apparent death, Hunk is quitting the team after their next mission and has no plans of ever coming back. He sends the letter to Keith at the end of the issue, and Keith reads through it as he and Sven prepare to get to work. But then the comic got cancelled. Again. And unlike the main Devil's Due series, there was no epilogue chapter to hastily wrap up the cliffhanger. After the cancellation of their main comics, Dynamite commissioned 2 separate miniseries in different continuities. First came a crossover between the original Voltron cartoon and Robotech, another animated series made from combining multiple anime into one shared universe, which premiered in the mid-1980s, a year after Voltron did. Written by Tommy Yoon and Bill Spangler, the miniseries ran for 5 issues between December 2013 and August of 2014. The comic opens at some point late in the first season of Voltron, with the rest of the team trying to encourage Keith to confess his feelings for Allura when they're interrupted by Karan warning them of an approaching object threatening Eris known as the Omega Comet. But when Voltron and its pilots fly into orbit to deal with the comet, all of them vanish in a burst of light, leaving planet Eris defenseless. Years pass, during which time Lotor usurps his father's place as king of Planet Doom and completely conquers Eris. In the aftermath of his conquest, he goes to inspect where the Castle of Lions used to sit, and finds a mural dedicated to Allura and the other missing pilots. We then cut over to Robotech's Earth in the year 2009 during the first 3 episodes of Robotech Season 1, where Earth's government has finished reconstructing an alien battleship that crashed on Earth in 1999, now rechristened as the SDF-1 Battle Fortress. When an alien force known as the Zantradi arrives in Earth's solar system in pursuit of the Battle Fortress, the SDF-1 is deployed into orbit to defend the planet in response to the alien attack. The battle is soon interrupted as both sides detect an unknown energy signature, and an unidentified object blows through the Zantradi flagship before splitting off into 5 pieces, one of which heads right for the SDF-1 just as the crew warps the ship out of the way. One of the objects crashes down on the island base the SDF launched from, and a pair of civilians visiting for the Battle Fortress's launch party investigate, where they find the Black Lion of Voltron. Keith spends several years in a coma before waking up in 2014, during which time Hunk, Pidge, and Lance have told Earth's military leadership the basics of where they came from, while Allura and the Blue Lion remain missing in action. After Keith wakes up, the leadership of the Earth Defense Force interview him, but are interrupted by the arrival of another Zantradi invasion force. While the Earth Defense Fleet's Skull Squadron repels the invaders, Keith reunites with his teammates and they discuss how the comet was responsible for sending them to this universe. The team soon manages to get to their Lions and join the battlefield, driving off the enemy fleet in the process, at the cost of catching the interest of the Zantradi commander Lord Chiron. To avoid risking the Lions being captured for study, the Voltron pilots are transferred to a military base in Alaska, during which time Pidge tracks down a lead to Allura's location in Egypt. Meanwhile, back in the Voltron universe, Lotor summons Hagar to join him on Eris, and begins preparing a plan to take control of the Omega Comet in the hopes of using it to bring Allura back. During which time, we get flashbacks to the last time the comet came to Eris, when a very young Lotor and his Erusian mother Laura visited the planet as part of a peace delegation from Doom, which turns out to be a ruse by Urak and Hagar to eliminate King Alfor and the young Princess Allura, resulting in Alfor's death as described in the original cartoon. After Zarkon's conquest, he declared that he would kill 10 civilians for each day that the surviving royal household refused to surrender, and when Laura protested the declaration, young Lotor was forced to watch as his father strangled his mother to death before his eyes. You know, just the kind of wholesome, family-friendly content you'd find in the original series. In the present, Hagar manages to use a series of magic rings to bind the comet and give herself direct control over it. But as she brings it to Eris, the SDF-1 emerges from the comet after the crew completes their warp jump from the beginning of the miniseries. Thinking the new arrivals are a threat, Lotor dispatches a fighter squadron to attack them, only for the Battle Fortress's energy weapons to destroy Lotor's ships. The SDF-1 crew proceed to fly down into Eris's atmosphere, where they make contact with Karan and Sven at the North Pole, where the Castle of Lions was relocated in secret after the Drools took the planet. After getting caught up on the state of planet Eris and the background of the Omega Comet, the SDF-1's leading technician, Emil Lang, theorizes that they can get back to their original universe by activating the ship's warp drive while inside the comet's gravity well. But to get close enough to do that, they're going to have to fight their way through the Drool forces and break Hagar's hold over the comet. Back on Robotech's Earth, Keith arrives in Egypt with an escort from Skull Squadron leader Roy Fokker, and finds Allura next to the Pyramids of Giza, only to discover that after her crash landing in the Blue Lion, the princess has lost all of her memories. The Zentradi attack to try and steal the Black Lion, but when Keith tries to take Allura with him, she runs back to the Blue Lion, insisting that she can't leave it behind. While Keith is forced to focus on saving his own lion from Lord Chiron's forces, the ghost of King Alfor appears to Allura and helps her regain her memories, allowing her to save the Black Lion in the nick of time. The rest of their team come to help in their lions after sneaking away from the base in Alaska, and together they form Voltron to destroy the Zentradi command ship. Voltron and Roy then fly into orbit as the Omega Comet approaches Earth, and despite being in different dimensions, they can see the rings that Hagar is using to control it. After forming a blazing bow, Voltron destroys the rings around the comet, while at the same time, the SDF-1 crew execute their warp jump after battling their way through Lotor's Robeasts. The simultaneous maneuvers successfully sends the heroes of both franchises back to their own universes, and in the process, the timeline resets itself back to the beginning of the story as if nothing in the comic had ever happened. A year after the final issue, Dynamite posted a pair of epilogue pages on Facebook to promote the release of the comic's paperback collected edition. One was about two fans arguing over how the comic should have ended, and the other was about Allura's mice speculating over what the Lion pilots were up to now. And while it could just be for fun, the fact that both of them revolve around the premise of two individuals getting into a fistfight over what happens next does raise questions about what happened behind the scenes in regards to the comic's creative direction. The same year these epilogue comics were posted, Dynamite came out with their last miniseries titled Voltron From the Ashes, which released from September 2015 to February 2016. Like Voltron Force, From the Ashes focused on a new generation of pilots, taking place 200 years after Voltron permanently defeated the Drool Empire. In the centuries since that fateful day, Eris and most of the universe have settled into a time of peace, and Voltron has not been needed since. But an order of monks on Eris has spent that time guarding the giant robot where it fell after the battle, and training new generations of pilots, each in 5 groups of 5, in case the day eventually comes when a threat emerges that only Voltron can defeat. Meanwhile, Hagar managed to escape the battle and spent the intervening centuries in stasis before her pod was eventually found by a band of marauders known as the Rahrag. On Eris, the story follows the group of cadets assigned to Team Black, consisting of the hot-headed squad leader Jace, snarky ladies man Vega, Nikki, who's there to bring honor and status to her family name, Kieran, who loves playing card games, and Ray, who seems like she's being set up as the emotional support and peacemaker of the group during her limited focus. Though the team does well in the constant trials and tests of their training, they always come in second place to the all-star Red team because of Jace's tendency to charge in by himself without his team, along with his refusal to take the trials seriously out of the belief that there's no point to them and that Voltron will never be needed again. It's only when Hagar and the Rahrog launch an invasion of Eris that he realizes what his stubbornness cost him and his team, as the Red team are the ones given the honor of reactivating and piloting Voltron against Hagar's new Robeasts. But when the All-Star Squad gets killed off-screen before they can even make it inside Voltron, the Misfit backup squad is called upon to step up and do what they've spent years training for. Meanwhile, the miniseries intercuts between the present day and flashbacks to Voltron's last battle with the Drool Empire, showing how Voltron ultimately defeated the last of the Robeasts at the cost of all the pilots except for Keith dying from their injuries. In the present, the new generation of pilots come together and manage to reactivate Voltron, destroy Hagar's new Robeasts, and drive back the Rahrog, killing Hagar for good in the process of destroying the Rahrog flagship. As the people of Eris cheer Voltron's victory, the final issue jumps forward decades into the future, where a now elderly Jace and Vega hide the keys to the lines in a cave for the next generation should Voltron ever be needed again. At the same time that most of Dynamite's Voltron comics were being released, Classic Media was bought up by DreamWorks Animation in 2012, giving DreamWorks the rights to adapt Voltron thanks to Classic Media's involvement in the production of Voltron Force. Then 2 years later, a pair of artists from Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, Lauren Montgomery and Joaquin Dos Santos, approached DreamWorks to pitch a new Voltron series that put a modern spin on the original premise for contemporary audiences, which led to the production of Legendary Defender starting in mid-2014, and eventually the series started releasing on Netflix in June 2016. Meanwhile, at some point during this time, Ted Koplar stepped down as president of World Events Productions and was replaced by his own son, Bob Koplar. And now we've come full circle. If you want a full summary of the plot of Legendary Defender, I've already made one on my channel, along with several videos analyzing the story and characters, all built around the central thesis that the final season was butchered by executive meddling from World Events, specifically from Bob Koplar. And if you want to listen to my summary of the show, I've left a link to it in the description. As we reach the end of this video, I want to wrap things up by talking about all the ways that Legendary Defender pulls elements from previous incarnations of the franchise. When you look at the full history of the franchise like this, it's incredibly obvious just how much the modern Voltron series took inspiration from every incarnation that came before it. Legendary Defender borrows names for characters and locations from both Golion and Defender of the Universe, using Altean and Galra to refer to Allura and her enemies' peoples instead of Erusians and Drool. Dibazal, the original name of the character who became Zarkon, is reused as the name of the Galra home planet, while the name of Lotor's counterpart, Syncline, is the name of the prince's personal giant robot. Meanwhile, the name of Hagar's counterpart, Onerva, is used in Legendary Defender as Hagar's true name, which is amusing because the final episodes of Golion reveal that Onerva is Syncline's grandmother as opposed to being Lotor's mother in Legendary Defender. And Commander Sendak's name is derived from the Golion character Sadak, while the Voltron counterpart's name Urak was repurposed as a potential candidate when Keith's parents were picking out baby names. Meanwhile, they adapted Sven into a new character, Shiro, with the same name as his Golion counterpart, whose story arc I talked about in one of my previous videos mirrors how Sven was created in the first place by combining two identical characters into one. And in addition to the character names, Legendary Defender touches on ideas that haven't been utilized in the franchise since the original series, like the evil alien empire being active in multiple galaxies, with a motivation stemming from the destruction of their home planet, and having a heroic resistance movement within their own ranks. But on top of that, the structure of Legendary Defender's overarching story even mimics the structure of the original show. While Voltron Legendary Defender was released as 8 seasons of varying lengths, the show was produced as 3 seasons of 26 episodes each. And the first production season of Legendary Defender ended with Voltron battling a giant Zarkon Robeast while a princess and a band of rebels led a raid on Haggar's lair, just like in the final episodes of the 80s cartoon's first season. In both shows, Lotor is demoted by his father shortly before the heroes launch a major attack on Zarkon's territory after securing control of a cannon that can fire at targets in other solar systems. Each show had a complicated dance of Lotor taking over leadership from Zarkon after Voltron dealt his father a major defeat, only for Zarkon to return to the throne and demote Lotor, after which Lotor soon starts openly fighting his father. And the last 2 seasons feature elements that call back to the TV movie at the end of the original series, Fleet of Doom, such as the Lion pilots fighting alongside an Earth-based team, traveling inside a mental realm shaped by people's thoughts and memories, and having the main conflict be against Haggar, with victory being achieved by appealing to the last bit of goodness left inside the witch. Not to mention that both arcs came right after a storyline where Lotor and our heroes worked alongside each other. Meanwhile, there are multiple episodes of Legendary Defender that directly copy the premises of episodes from Voltron Force and Third Dimension almost one for one. Like the episode of Third Dimension where a Lion pilot gets mind-controlled by Haggar into turning against his teammates, culminating in a one-on-one fight with one of said teammates trying to get them to come back to their senses. Or the Voltron Force episode involving a visit to a special planetary body devoted to a key mystical location defended by a Lion Guardian spirit, where characters enter a pyramid-shaped structure and undergo a series of trials to prove themselves worthy of unlocking the secrets within. Or the Third Dimension one where the Voltron pilots travel to an alternate universe where history as the heroes know it happened differently and resulted in a divergent timeline. Or the Voltron Force one where Keith finds out at some point after the 20th episode of the series that one of his parents was an alien. And even outside of episode premises, Legendary Defender pulls lots of other elements from those other 2 shows for its own world building and characters. Like how Zarkon's fortress in both Legendary Defender and Third Dimension is mobile in space rather than fixed on any specific planet. Or how the Bayards in Legendary Defender and their ability to give the Paladins unique weapons are clearly based on the Voltcom devices in Voltron Force. But Legendary Defender didn't just pull inspiration from the shows. Even the comics contribute elements to the characters and story of the modern series. From the Devil's Due comics, we got the arc of Sven/Shiro being rejected by a lion and subsequently brainwashed by Haggar into attacking his teammates, as well as Allura being related to Voltron's creator, who was part of an alliance of multiple alien species, and also the Lions having psychic bonds with their pilots that are how they combine into Voltron. Meanwhile, from the Dynamite comics, we got Sven/Shiro being Keith's predecessor as team leader, Zarkon being a former Voltron pilot motivated by his family who was once friends with the robot's creator, and a dead Voltron pilot having their spirit transferred inside the Black Lion. And even the Robotech crossover contributes things to Legendary Defender, like the concept of a comet that can cross between alternate universes, as well as Lotor being half of Allura's species, which was the case with Syncline and GoLion, but had never been acknowledged in Voltron before then. Even the characters from the Robotech franchise get some love, with a lookalike of Roy Fokker having a cameo at the Garrison in Legendary Defender's first episode, and almost being the other groom at Shiro's last-minute wedding in the epilogue of Season 8 before DreamWorks changed it to the Garrison extra that he married in the final version to avoid any potential copyright infringement lawsuits. So what's the point of making all these comparisons? Well, over the years, I've seen a number of quote-unquote fans, particularly those who are die-hard fans of the original, who despised Legendary Defender for not having robot fights in every single episode like a quote-unquote proper giant robot series should have. I even saw a guy complaining a few times because Voltron wasn't formed for the first time until the end of the 3rd production episode, which was already 1 episode sooner than in the original series. I also saw multiple instances of people spreading the lie that Montgomery and Dos Santos never actually wanted to do a Voltron show to begin with, and were forced to make Legendary Defender instead of a different property that they actually wanted. So my counter-argument is to point at all of these ways that Voltron Legendary Defender borrows from previous iterations. Because why would any person go to this much effort to honor the history of the brand they were working with if they did not care about it? Even if one isn't aware of the fact that Montgomery and Dos Santos were the ones who approached DreamWorks about rebooting Voltron rather than the other way around, looking at the history of the franchise shows just how much love went into making the modern series. Every single version of Voltron, whether comic book or animated, contributes elements to Legendary Defender in some way, shape, or form. whether it be a one-off gag or major storylines and character backstories. Voltron Legendary Defender is a love letter to the entire Voltron franchise and each iteration that has come before it on every level. And the passion its creative team clearly has for the brand and its history deserves to be recognized and respected, regardless of how the final season turned out, which I've repeatedly argued in all my previous videos of constructing Legends was the fault of meddling from Bob and World Events. If you want proof, just go watch those videos. Thank you all so much for watching. I'd like to give a special thank you to my good friend Crystal Rebellion of Team Purple Lion, whose vast knowledge of Defender of the Universe, primarily the Lion Voltron episodes, was a major help for me when making this video. If anyone has any thoughts or observations regarding anything I've said here today, feel free to share in the comments below. I'm taking another hiatus after this video goes up, and when I come back I'll be doing another season of Kingdom Hearts videos. But not to worry, I am nowhere near done with Voltron yet, so stay tuned. As always, if you want to be notified the next time I post new material, be sure to click subscribe and check out the community tab on my channel for updates on my future projects. Hope to see you all next time.
Cars are moving like a half a mile an hour, and I started staring at the passengers and waving goodbye. Can you tell me what was ever really special about me?